This story could have happened in reality. In the Republic of Korea, on the 15th year of Chondeok, apart from the victim's footprints, no prints were found. The main suspects were 3 red-faced dogs. These were the Iron Heart and Iron Sword of the Hwashan school. The crime was quickly solved and the player's fame grew. The young man thought that he had played for too long, because he had already solved the crime. He was Pokeway, who solved crimes using only text information. This is a game where it was necessary to figure out the culprit of random crimes that occurred in the world of Murima. Although this game didn't really fit in with modern games, it still had the fun that other games couldn't provide. The only problem was that it was time-consuming. The guy could guess the criminal even before he finished scanning fingerprints and regretted that he would hardly ever be able to find another game like this. He doubted that there would ever be more games like this, but he still decided to look for at least slightly similar ones. He decided to focus on a similar genre in the hopes that he would find something equally exciting. The first thing he heard in the new game was the appeal of some person who favored him and gave him a tablet on his belt and asked how it was possible to be in such a state. The man expressed dissatisfaction that he was not listened to very carefully and asked if the player knew how many Hangon residents wanted to become Pokeway. Now the young man's name was Pokeway and so his new story began. He was slightly surprised. It felt like he was actually transported into the game and saw what was actually happening. Looking around, he discovered that he was on a fairly busy street and was talking to this old man opposite. Pokeway was a coveted profession whose duties included arresting evil criminals by order of a judge. Well, in reality, she was similar to a level 9 civil servant in the Republic of Korea, although perhaps she was even better. The guy tried to realize that these letters were now himself. The man turned to him again, noting that he had heard about a smart guy with psychic powers, which is why he was given such a sign, although the man emphasized that he trusted the rumors too much. The man recalled how the young man, thanks to his psychic abilities, found the lost pestle with which his mother and father steamed the tea leaves in Bukit Ajam, and now was the time when everyone desperately needed his abilities. At first, the young man did not quite understand what was happening and what abilities this man was talking about, and he decided to take a minute to figure it out. He definitely remembered that he was playing a game and closed his eyes for a second, and after opening them he found himself in this place already talking to that man. He had some dim memories of the former owner of this body. He seemed to be a wanderer without a home or family and was lucky enough to become a poke after solving several crimes. Now he was given his first case after becoming a pokeway, if his guesses were correct. In front of him stood a man who was a boss, a pot who was akin to a detective. While he was figuring out where he was, he slightly missed the point that this man was trying to convey to him and decided to try to recap everything he had said. Fortunately, all the words spoken to him by those men began to surface again in his consciousness, and thanks to this he did not miss a single important detail. He began to delve deeper and deeper into these memories until only my guesses became something real. The young man soon really remembered everything that the man had told him, and felt that he had experienced it in the past. He shared it with the man so that he would remember everything, and he was pleasantly surprised by it. Pokeway Yen noted that the man was talking about the candlestick that mom and dad had lost, and one could remember how this problem was solved. The young man emphasized that the lamp was not wet that day. Afterwards he asked if the man by any chance knew the structure of the lamp that Mama Papa used, noting that the upper bowl contained oil, and the lower one contained cold water. It was usually filled with oil from a lit wick placed on top of it. Having prepared a second bowl for the one in which the oil was, it was possible to fill it with cold water to maintain the temperature of the oil and preserve it. The young man pointed out that since Ma Papa tended the tea leaves even at night, it was a normal thing for her to work on the wick, but while she was sleeping the candlestick had disappeared and, more importantly, there was no cold water left in the remaining lamp. Pokeway Yen also noted that the reason for this was that someone had drained the water and reduced the amount of oil in advance, and when the lamp went out, it became dark in the room, which forgave the task of stealing the candlestick. The young man stated that this was precisely why he suspected the servant who serviced the lamp in the morning, because whoever worked with the lamp was most likely a criminal. The man was delighted, noting that this could be the very sixth sense that the monks talked about, and suggested that the guy could have a Buddhist, Taoist, or simply innate ability. Pokeway Yen smiled contentedly that his guess had worked and noted to himself that he was lucky to have solved this crime earlier, because he had suffered greatly with it then. After this, the Pa declared that the young man could now be trusted and told about their first case, which actually surprised the guy a little. Podu, not embarrassed by the young man's surprise, said that the owner of the estate had been stabbed to death. This matter worried many people. The murder took place right on the estate and the victim's body was found in the pavilion outside. Podu noted that apart from the fingerprints of many of the victims, no other fingerprints were found. And only one trace was left on the victim's body in the form of a knife deeply thrust into the back. No other wounds were found. The pillow also anxiously emphasized that the face of the owner of the estate looked strangely peaceful, not depicting a drop of fear. Soon they arrived at the crime scene. Podu decided that he should accompany the young man to help him and also to control his actions. When they approached the gate, the man noted that this was the very estate of the deceased master. The man shouted loudly, calling people from the estate, warning that Podu had come to investigate the crime, but for a long time no one opened the door. This confused the man. He didn't want to look stupid, but it was also alarming that all the people from the estate had disappeared somewhere. But after a little while the gates opened. The man who came out of the yard noted that Podu arrived too late and was surprised that he could not easily resolve one matter. The man said that the judge was angered by the slowness of Podu and then finally entrusted this case to him, and he was already in the process of resolving it. This man's name was Podusa. Podu immediately became angry and began to quarrel with Podusa, who with an arrogant face entrusted the name of the judge and talked nonsense, and then completely asked him to get lost in a good way. Podu was surprised that he knew martial arts and, for a pod, he was quite knowledgeable about them. Podusa emphasized that he did not lie and invited the guests of honor to solve the crime and suggested that if it was also interesting to take a look. But Podu did not calm down and called his competitor a scoundrel. Podu, following the men, decided that apparently they were not that late, but Podusa definitely came to the judge and chatted with him. Podusa continued the investigation and emphasized that apart from the victim, no other traces were found. It was more likely that the culprit was a martial arts master, and a very high-level master at that. Podu believed that he stood on the distant wall and used his lightness skill. According to his story, the criminal landed on the roof of the pavilion, killed the owner of the estate with one blow, and then again used the skill of lightness to escape along the wall. Podu was outraged by this version, paying attention to the distance that separated these two places, but Podusa reminded that first-class martial artists had one skill called Genshin Bop, which made the body light. After that, Podusa pointed out that the number one suspect was Ironheart Iron Sword Peniel 1. He was a master who had reached the pinnacle of the Huashan school. The second suspect was the first brother of the Red-Faced Three Ghosts named Jiang Il. He was a martial artist that even the inhabitants of the Black Path of Murima did not dare to touch. The third suspect, Podusa, was the guest of the Three Cuts named Dampung Ho, who was a master shrouded in a veil that frightened people. These were all notorious martial artists of the Murima world. Podusa cleared his throat and noted that he was infinitely grateful that their esteemed guests had fulfilled the request of one unworthy of him. He stated that he still dared to invite the guests of honor because someone had killed Mr. and escaped, which meant he was a criminal. The masters immediately became indignant and tried to find an excuse for themselves. They noted that they were busy at that time or had no other connection with the deceased master. Poduo asked the brother of the Red-Faced Three Ghosts what Huashan was doing here for the school. He was confused and replied that whoever it was not Zhang. Podusa agreed that the iron-hearted great swordsman Pen was not the one to commit murder and that it was more likely that Jiang Il was helping him with his work. Podusa clearly said that he did not want to remove such suspicions from this man, which angered the martial artist. He was outraged that he was considered a murderer and, without hiding his anger, asked Podusa to repeat what he had said. Podupo understood that Podusa had been convinced of this from the very beginning, and the guest of the Three Cuts, Dampun Ho, was the culprit and had consulted with other masters about creating this situation, because if he killed Mr. N alone, he would have met a cruel end. Podusa replied that it was not necessarily so, and if the master was found innocent the judge would release him. But even this clarification did not calm Dampun Ho. He replied that he strongly doubted what was said. Podian prepared himself for a fight to break out and grabbed the hilt of his sword. All the onlookers retreated, so as not to expose themselves to danger. The air felt like it was filled with an atmosphere of pent-up tension. Deciding that it was worth intervening in this, Poduyan glanced at the masters and Podusa stated that there was no need for the upcoming fight. He clearly stated that Dampung Ho was innocent, which surprised everyone present. Podusa started cursing at Pokwiyena, outraged that such a boy had the courage to open his mouth in such a place. One of the Podu emphasized that the boy was out of his mind to decide that he was allowed to do this. Poduo did not react to these curses in any way, surprised that in their opinion it was reckless to interfere in such a situation. He did not understand what the guy was thinking, but then he remembered that the guy had psychic abilities and suggested that he could use them at that very moment. Poduo smiled and decided to just trust this boy and see what happens next. He wanted the young man to show them all his psychic talent as he had shown him the day before. At the same time, Pokwayen thought that he had screwed up and had gotten carried away without thinking because it seemed like his blood would start to boil at any moment, but at the same time, he thought that he was lucky to know about the case of the murder of the owner of the estate, although in reality it could not be completed with one click of the mouse like a game. He couldn't retreat, and once he stepped forward, he was obliged to prove to everyone that he had psychic abilities. He was sure that no matter how poor he was, if he showed such talent, No one would be able to ignore what he said. He thought about how he had to make all this true, but he couldn't know for sure if this information he had was real. He doubted that where he ended up was the same as in the game. After this thought, he was suddenly struck by a severe headache. Well, it was not an easy headache. It gave him a very important realization. A stream of thoughts appeared in his head. He very quickly began to analyze everything he had heard about the crime. Well, it happened to him so quickly that he was confused for a while, not understanding what was really happening to him. The thought that the trace was left by the murdered official only 2/4 of an hour ago and was accompanied by other traces. He noticed that the boot of the deceased owner of the estate was slightly higher than 8 chi, and the width and depth were more than 9. Those present noticed that the guy was confused and silent, which made them angry, and they began to threaten him with a cut-out tongue. But Pokwayan decided that he should not be distracted and should put all his questions aside and explain what had happened. He replied that all this should wait and people should hear what he had to say. Podyasa became even more furious that the boy dared to tell nonsense in such a place, but one of the masters stopped him and convinced him to listen to the young man. The young man said that no matter how skilled a martial artist was, flying to such a distance without leaving a single trace was not an easy task, and the suspected great swordsman most likely could not cope with such a task either. The masters agreed with him, noting that they themselves doubted that they could do this, and were not embarrassed to admit their weakness, but Podyasa continued to insist on his own, convincing the others that it could be learned and used in such a situation. Pokwayan asked the great swordsman if it was necessary to push off from the top of the wall to fly up and land in the pavilion. He was getting at the fact that after the energy released from his feet, the wall could not have remained without a single scratch. This was confirmed by one of the masters, who noted that the master usually released his internal energy from the pressure point of the Yankin, which made this condition impossible to fulfill. Pokwayan noted that no matter how excellent the skill of lightness was, the push from the top of the wall and the flight must necessarily leave an external mark on the wall, and asked the others to look carefully for possible damage to the wall. Everyone present thought seriously about the young man's words, having no right to disagree with him, because he said everything correctly. Many admired the talents of this Pokwe, which was truly amazing, and considered that he was not just a diamond. The masters thought that he seemed to possess some kind of psychic power or something even stronger. Soon the people who were examining the wall shouted that no damage was found and the wall was without a trace. Podyasa was angry and didn't understand how Pokwe, who had recently arrived, managed to check the top of the wall, and shouted to the people checking to look even more carefully. One of the masters interrupted him and demanded to hear the young man out to the end, thinking to himself that he was explaining everything as if he were an immortal who was retelling the words spoken to him by the ghosts of these places. The master turned to Pokwayan, noting that he understood that the killer did not climb the wall, and asked how he then entered the pavilion. Pokwayan breathed a sigh of relief, assuming that he had managed to gain trust in himself, and asked to be allowed to continue the explanation. Pokwayan wondered if anyone had checked the tracks of the respected owner of the estate leading to the pavilion. He noted that the height of his shoes was just over 8 chi from top to bottom, but these footprints were not his. He emphasized that these traces were definitely more than 9 chi in length, and in addition, even despite the not-so-great weight of the owner of the estate, these traces went almost 3 chi deep. Many thought about these words, and one of the masters suggested that the owner of the estate could study the skill of waiting, but another noted that some criminal could follow in the footsteps of the master. Pokwayan said that the killer was in a position within the estate that allowed easy access to his master, and was the person who stood to gain the most from Master On's death. After these words, a crunch of a branch was heard behind the crowd. Someone stepped on it, sneaking up and wanting to remain unnoticed. Everyone immediately noticed this and turned around to see who was walking there. At the same time, Pokwayan stated that the criminal was most likely the manager, and his gaze fell on a man sneaking past the crowd, who was the manager. Pokwe noted that the manager had worked in the estate for a long time. Apparently he was not satisfied with the relationship with the master, which is why he concealed the intention to kill, and after his death would have the opportunity to dispose of the estate's property at his own discretion. Pokwe emphasized that he did not want to be sentenced to death, so he had been preparing for this crime for a long time. And fortunately for him, the owner of the estate had a murderous disposition, so when he was in the pavilion, even his servants did not dare to approach. Pokwayan noticed that with the help of a well-sharpened knife, the manager boldly followed the respected gentleman into the pavilion. And it was precisely under such circumstances that this terrible crime could have occurred. He remained unnoticed because he left no unnecessary traces and was able to easily escape without being suspected. The manager became indignant, calling it all nonsense, and did not understand that he could be blamed because of some length of traces. Pokwayan said that this could only be confirmed when the traces were compared, and emphasized that no one in this estate except the manager left traces of such a size, to which the manager continued to be indignant and swear. Pokwayan also suggested that on the day of the death of the respected owner of the estate, The servants were supposed to check the teacup as usual, and the woman confirmed that the manager ordered her to carefully check the tea set. Pokwe noticed that the respected owner of the estate must have had the habit of drinking tea in the pavilion alone, and the manager, pretending to check the cup, poured a sleeping pill into the tea. Pokwe noted that since it was poured into a cup of tea, no one would see anything unusual in the remaining drink, and these words made the manager shake all over. He had one last hope to remove all suspicions, but he only continued to swear, realizing that he was caught red-handed, and then hit Pokwe using a martial arts technique. This only confirmed Pokwe Yan's suspicions, because he assumed that death would be easy even if the owner of the estate was defenseless, and now it turned out that the manager knew martial arts. At that moment, Pokwe Yan was again struck by the sharp headache he had felt just recently. Taking advantage of this moment, the manager attacked the Pokwe with a knife, wanting to kill him. Everything happened in a matter of seconds and did not give Pokwe the opportunity to dodge, because he was confused due to a sudden headache. The young man was horrified because he understood that he would not have time to dodge this blow, which could well have been fatal for him. Well then, martial arts masters who were previously suspects in this murder intervened in this situation. With one very quick and sharp blow of the ball, the manager's hand was cut off just before he could plunge the knife into Pokwe Yan. Martial arts master Dam Pung Ho turned to Pokwe Yan and declared that he would not forget his favor. Pokwe Yan smiled broadly and replied that the martial artist could easily forget about it. Another pod turned to the martial arts master and asked for forgiveness for his rudeness, noting that he wanted to catch the killer, but they were an innocent person. Jmyong-il was still angry, but Podu asked him to calm down and promised that he could be contacted any day if necessary to pay off the debt for the insult. Podu turned to Pokwe Yan and noted that his psychic powers were impressive and emphasized that thanks to him, it was possible to avoid the execution of the innocent master. He promised that he would remember his name. Hearing this, Pokwe Yan was a little confused from embarrassment. Poduo walked up to Pokwe Yanu and gave him a pat on the back and noted that the honorable judge was very worried about him, but if the great swordsman Ironheart, Iron Sword himself said this, then the judge's worries should definitely disappear. After this, the masters promised that they would hand everything over to the judge and hurried away. Seeing that they were leaving, Pokwesa shouted to them in a trembling voice, begging them to wait. He ran after them, wanting to correct what had happened and smooth over this humiliation of the great masters, and Poduo put his arm around Pokwe Yan's shoulders and, smiling, noted that he would now be able to count on him. Pokwe Yan looked him in the eyes and promised that he could be relied upon and that he would try his best not to let him down. In the game, solving crimes only gave spiritual energy and glory, and that was it, but in reality it was completely different. When the Pokwe successfully completed the case, it was reported to the judge and the Pokwe received confirmation. It was a very rare and unusual crime, but apparently due to the influence of the Iron Heart of the Iron Sword, the judge awarded Pokwe Yan a silver coin. Poduo asked the young man not to be overconfident about his reward, since there was no rule stating that he could receive the same next time. The man smiled and laughed, and Pokwe Yan decided that he was in a good mood. Most likely his own reputation had been enhanced when Podusa was disgraced. After this, the pod told that any Pokwe wanted to live a long life, but had to live honestly. The Pokwe must accept coins, be they copper or silver, only from 3 people of the guilty party, the relatives of the guilty party and the victims of the guilty party. But Pokwe Yan decided to change the subject and asked if Podu knew about headaches when using psychic powers, and noted that because of his psychic powers, he suffered from headaches every time. Podu thought for a second and noted that this was a complex problem and explained that the answers to questions regarding psychic abilities, known to Taoists and sorcerers, were unlikely to be known about this by an ordinary doctor, and he, being a Podu, certainly did not know anything. He only noted that people said that talent shortened lives and that this was a real nuisance for such a young man. These words seriously scared Pokwe Yan. Podu said that if he had headaches along with his psychic abilities, he would like to say something. But this was an ominous sign. Although he personally did not know the reason, but most people with psychic powers lived unhappy short lives. It was said that the reason was that such people were adored by ghosts and were hunted by vengeful spirits, but Pod didn't know for sure if this was true. However, based on long experience, he could confidently say that it was something bad. Pokwe Yan grabbed his head in fear, because he thought that he was simply carried into the game and he would see the status windows, but everything turned out to be so serious. Podu promised to ask several good local doctors about this, but asked the young man not to rely too much on their help. Before they could finish talking about this, they met a man on their way. The guest of the 3 cuts, Dam Pun Ho, appeared in front of them and looked very serious. Poduo turned to the great swordsman Ai, noting that he did not know what exactly brought him to them, but if he was looking for reprisals, he should have gone in a different direction, since they were not the ones who accused him. The viceroy stated that he had come to repay a debt, The swordsman immediately emphasized that Pokwe Yan was suffering from a headache and was waiting for confirmation of his words. Both Pokwe Yan and Po Duo were very surprised by the appearance of this man with such words. Pokwe Yan followed the great swordsman, although he was quite anxious. He was dumbfounded by what Po Duo said, and after those words, the master immediately appeared on his way, but he followed him because he did not sense any evil intent and hoped that the master really knew the cause of his headaches. Dan Peng Ho turned around and noted that the young man most likely did not know the nature of his headache and promised to repay his kindness by telling him about it, for which Pokwe Yan thanked him with a smile and thought that it was a good deal. Dan Peng Ho asked if Pokwe knew about the Dantian, but the young man only looked at him in surprise and confusion, because he had never heard anything about this before. Dan Peng Ho said that initially the human body was one whole, but after birth it was divided into three parts, the chi and the spirit. A martial artist had to train in order from nature to spirit, but to unlock the upper dantian was an incredibly difficult task. It was completely impossible to do this using conventional methods. And even if it worked, the person could go crazy as soon as the obsession in the brain increased after the accumulation of internal energy. After which Dan Peng Ho explained that sometimes people were born with an open upper dantian and accumulated energy in this unusual way. They displayed strange and extraordinary psychic powers, which most likely belonged to Pokwe Yan. The martial artist noted that Pokwe Yan stored internal energy in his upper dantian, just like the people he talks about. Pokwe Yan was surprised. He didn't understand how he could collect energy all this time and asked the master about it, but he answered that she had such information because his own upper dantian was not open at all. Some Dalasites said that raising their inner spirit through conscious gathering was good karma and that such a talent could be something like that. Then Pokwe Yan remembered that when he solved a crime in the game there was the same reward, and now it was clearer to him how it was given. If his guess was correct, then the accumulation of energy in his upper dantian was also a way to gather information. He asked the martial artist whether his abilities were due to the upper dantian. The master replied that it was quite possible since psychic powers usually arose from an open upper dantian, but still, these were only assumptions, because it was still not fully known how powerful the powers of Pokwe Yan were. Dan Peng Ho noted that with powers such as mind reading, talking to ghosts, the spiritual eye, seeing the invisible, Pokwe Yan should be coughing up blood and dead by now. This frightened the young man even more. He asked the master to tell him more about the abilities he had mentioned, because he certainly did not want to die anytime soon. The master said that mind reading was an ability that went back to the extraordinary powers in Buddhism and, in addition to monks, some Taoists and sorcerers occasionally displayed similar psychic powers. Pokwe Yan could understand how it manifested itself. In fact, I assume that he could read the thoughts of others in detail, as it was described in science fiction books, but the master noted that if someone could do this, he would not be a person, but a Buddha himself. The master noted that the most talented person he had ever met was able to recognize people's lies. After that, the letters asked to tell about the spiritual eye. It was a psychic power that allowed one to see the invisible and in Buddhism was also called the Eye of Wisdom and was the rarest of all. The master noted that in the records they said that she saw the invisible, but no one knew what it meant. Pokwe Yan assumed that his ability was a spiritual eye and this option seemed the most suitable according to the description. If he focused, he could see in detail what was difficult to notice or recognize. The master said that not many people in the world of martial arts knew about the upper dantian and psychic powers and recommended looking for information in old books. After that, the letters asked what the master meant when he spoke about coughing up blood and death. He said that Pokwe's upper dantian was initially open, which was a reverse progression, so his spirit and chi could not support him. He was destined to cough up blood and die young. Pokwe Yenu was afraid to sum it up, all of which he did not possess martial arts and his body was weak and he would also die due to the presence of the spiritual eye. Very frightened, he asked the master if there was any way to prolong his life. The master replied that it existed and it was worth studying martial arts and training the lower and middle dantian. He could not remember any other ways. This answer disappointed the Pokwe. The master told him to just study martial arts if he wanted to live, but perhaps there were other ways that were not mentioned. Dan Peng Ho noted that the young man should have learned the basics of martial arts that Pokwe should know, even though they are third-rate. But Yun thought about how he was suddenly sent to the world of martial arts and did not even have time to train. He rummaged through his pockets noting that he seemed to have a manual on martial arts called The Divine Art for the Nation that was given to Pokwe and asked if it was worth looking at it. But the master forbade him to show his martial arts openly to another master. Pokwe Yan thought with a smile on his face that, in principle, the fact that this manual was given to everyone in letters already spoke about the level of all skills. The master studied this manual and noted that it contained the divine art of Vajra, an art with a 300-year history, to which Pokwe Yan wondered whether it was okay to teach him ordinary Pokwe. Dan Peng Ho, not understanding Pokwayan's emotions, noted that no one would most likely study a 300-year-old martial art because it was already outdated, which put the young man in an awkward position. The master explained that since the divine art of Vajra was an old method of cultivation, its results were slow and dim, but it was stable so that one rarely suffered internal wounds while studying it. The book was intended for the healthy accumulation of internal energy. Dampung Ho promised to temporarily help Pokwayan train with this martial art. Pokway was hesitant and asked if it was good enough. The master replied with displeasure that the art was rather crude, but that nothing could be done about it. Hearing this, Pokway rolled his eyes slightly in displeasure that Dampung Ho was being too straightforward. Soon, Pokway decided to test his abilities and began training under the guidance of Dampung Ho. He felt the strength in his hands and concluded that it was pretty good, and no matter how third-rate a martial art was, it was still a martial art. The master explained that in the martial arts world, a second-rank master is able to perfectly follow the form of one technique and that Pokyen should keep this in mind and train. The young man asked how long it would take him to reach the level of a second-rank master. Dampung Ho raised one finger up. Pokwayan quickly realized that it meant 1 year and was very surprised by this because he did not think it would be that long. But the master corrected him, explaining that he would need 10 whole years, and that was only if he had any talent. The master decided to demonstrate and asked the young man to watch carefully and repeat until he completely studied the form. He showed the first technique of Vajra, the first art of Vagyuk. Pokwayan watched in fascination as his master moved at an insanely fast pace. The masters noticed that it was unimportant whether Pokwayan could distinguish the movement or not, because usually no was performed in this way. The training method was to constantly look at the technique with concentration. Pokwayan listened to the martial arts master and tried to concentrate as much as possible, wishing not to miss any more details. Dampung Ho showed the form again and Pokwayan tried to study his every move. The master moved very quickly again and observation was made with great difficulty by Pokwayan, but he still managed to see everything that was required, although he had to spend a lot of effort to do so. He told the master that he clearly saw how he revealed the technique and noted that his spiritual eye had the ability to comprehend martial arts. Dampung Ho noted that this was a bad sign, because hardly anyone would like a master who could comprehend other people's techniques at a glance and who could be stabbed in the back and killed at any moment. The master asked the young man to be careful and not to get caught, but noted that this skill should help him in mastering martial arts and asked him to perform the first technique and noted that if he took control of his psychic powers, the headache would decrease. Pokwayan immediately began to repeat the first technique in his life, thinking about what would extract internal energy as he had just seen in the example of the master. Pokwayan exhaled and began to move exactly as Dampung Ho had shown him. He repeated the technique flawlessly, which surprised even himself. But then he discovered that the strength was flowing out of his entire body, evidence of which was the blood coming out of his nose. Pokwayan could not expect that the master would not feel sorry for him and would immediately use his combat technique on him. Pokwayan fell to the ground, and the master noticed that the young man had drawn internal energy from his upper dantian and was on the verge of a serious internal wound. The young man said that he had pressed on a painful point. He asked if the internal energy from the upper dantian was not dangerous, to which the master replied that it was indeed dangerous and that martial arts were based on the internal energy of the lower dantian. So using the energy of the upper dantian was taboo in martial arts. Pokwayan asked if it was possible to use it as freely as he did now, to which the master replied that no, and most likely the reason was that his upper dantian was open. The master emphasized that fortunately Pokway's internal injury was not serious, but while he should not draw out his energy until he was healed, I was surprised to myself that the young man was able to speak despite the fact that his silent point was affected. He noticed that the young man had unknowingly released the pressure point with the help of the internal energy accumulated in his upper dantian and could not even imagine how much energy had accumulated in him. Accumulating energy in the upper dantian was an incredibly difficult matter, but still, Pokwayan had an abnormal amount of internal energy accumulated in his upper dantian, as if he had been accumulating it for a long time. The master noted that the young man was lucky, but luck was unlikely to follow him constantly and he should have been more careful. Pokway promised that he would keep this in mind and asked if it was not possible to control the internal energy from the upper dantian. He explained that it was possible to do so and that it was necessary to train the lower and middle dantian and combine them into one and then the difference between the dantians would become insignificant. Well, these words seemed like some kind of joke to the letter, after which the master asked the letter to rise if the strength returned to him, noting that even if he could not use internal energy, He should be able to repeat the form of the technique. He asked to continue collecting energy and training martial arts to control his psychic power after he mastered the divine art of Vajra to find a better martial art, and Pokwe was interested in where it could be found. The master explained that he should have saved up some money and gone to a bookstore or done a favor for a prestigious orthodox school and asked it to share its knowledge. The master believed that the boy had outstanding abilities, although he did not say it out loud. Even the ability to read martial arts techniques at a glance was an incredible talent. Dampung Ho thought that if only he had not been born with the participation of death at a young age because of his open upper dandian, he would have become a desirable student even for a prestigious school. But Dampung Ho understood that nothing could be done, and if this was his fate, then the young man had to bear it. A few days later, Pokwe finally managed to learn quickly thanks to the spiritual lesson. Martial arts master Dampung Ho asked him to continue training alone without fail, noting that it was time for him to go. Pokwe did not expect the master to leave him so quickly and stated that he was going to buy him a drink. Masters replied that it was not worth doing and emphasized that the letters of the IOC can easily get involved in meaningless questions of favor and resentment, and asked him not to brag about everyone who taught him. Finally, Pokwe bowed low and sincerely thanked the great warrior for his teaching. Pokwe realized that he had learned a lot from him, watching the master go. Well, he was distracted by some noise coming from the crowd. He tried to see what was happening and what had so greatly interested many passers-by. He saw that the crowd had retreated from the table at which the guy was sitting, wolfing down various dishes with both full cheeks, and this made him anxious. Pokwe decided that he should get away from this place as quickly as possible, but the guy quickly recognized him and turned to the crowd for confirmation of his suspicions. The guy said that they were looking for him everywhere and invited him to sit down and have dinner together. Pokwe became even more worried, especially after he caught serious looks from many people. This guy was Po Duo's nephew, and recently, at the request of the elder, he began working together with Po Duo and Pokwe. Although all he did was eat. When they had finished dinner and left, Pokwe asked again if his nephew hadn't paid for anything. He replied that they were Pokwe who defended honest people and had no need to pay. Pokwe considered him a shameless thief, but this did not bother him as much as the looks and merchants behind his back who seemed like they could stab him in the back at any moment. Pokwe decided that it could not go on any longer and decided to hurry to leave, inviting his nephew, Pado, along with him. Pokwe looked in the direction Pokwe was pointing and said that there was a fanlu there. He explained that it was located in the center of a line of street stalls and was dubbed the most prosperous and luxurious area in the city, so much so that all the famous, it's true, jewelers gathered there. Pokwe asked why they couldn't go into the fanlu since it was part of their patrol area, to which Pokwe replied that they couldn't go there because the people in the fanlu were thieves. Pokwe rather rudely, shouting, noted that the people did not offer a single glass of cheap wine to the Pokwe, which they were, and defended the people, even using their fists. Pokwe realized that Pokwe's usual intimidation did not work for the fanlu traders. I tried to convince him, but he noted that they should have gone there to patrol. But the guy resisted until a man approached them, something about lost silver. Pokwe immediately hid behind Pokwe. It was obvious from him that he was not at all happy about the appearance of this man. Pokwe whispered in Pokwe's ear and asked him to hide his token and turn around as if they had never been in this place, but Pokwe still could not understand what was the reason for such behavior of his conditional partner. Pokwe noted that some pathetic thief stole the money and it would be bad if they couldn't find it. I note that if the merchants can afford to open a chongjong in Fanlu, then they will report everything to the judge. Pokwe didn't even know how to react to these words. I consider them very strange. He frowned and asked why they couldn't just find the thief then, to which Pokwe replied that catching a criminal working in a huge market was more difficult than it seemed. Pokwe asked if Pokwe had any idea how cunning and devious the people working in a place like Fanlu were. He emphasized that they were not so stupid as to steal the money in a way that would easily lead to their capture, and if that were the case, the Chongjong would have found the money by now. Pokwe tried to hurry Pokwe and hide from this place before the man noticed them. It was already too late and he paid attention to them and asked for help. He asked the guys in Pokwe to help urgently. With his whole appearance he showed that he was extremely unhappy with this request. Pokwe immediately began to apologize, intending to refuse to help, but Pokwe noted that they were already cornered and had no choice but to help. He emphasized that if they tried to escape, it would not end well for them. Pokwe shut up and, with a heavy sigh, agreed that Pokwe was right. While he tried to calm the man down, Pokwe winked at his partner, promising both him and the one asking for help to solve everything himself. Pokwe asked the man if he could tell more about what had happened. The man looked very confused and exhaled heavily, noting that it was not even worth asking about such a thing. He was laconic and said that silver had been stolen from the Chongqing where they conducted money exchanges. He also said that in the backyard of the Chongqing, in its deepest part, there was a separate warehouse where the Chongqing silver was stored. Every month this man had to record the silver in the register and report it to his boss, and this month there was less silver there than was recorded. The man assumed that the thief must have gotten involved among the local workers. The man emphasized that he and all the workers were on edge and asked to find the person who stole the silver. Even though this crime was publicized, none of the workers admitted to their involvement. When Pocoyo entered the warehouse, he felt that it was as cold as winter and noted that a person must have enough determination to even think about stealing silver. Having studied everything around, Pocoyen asked if a formation had been installed to keep outsiders away and added that the pharmacy, as it turned out, was causing the country's phenomenon. The man confirmed this and said that even the clone of Juga who had set up this formation could not predict what happened and apologized. Pocoyen also asked if there was anyone approaching the warehouse, and the man assured that no one except him came close. Pocoyen appeared to him and asked if they had security, to which the man replied that there was security. In order to move the silver out, the guard had to directly touch the silver, but the man also added that when the guards entered and left the warehouse, they took off all their clothes and went through a check, and they even checked the insides of their mouths, ears and buttocks, and he was surprised that the young man could suspect the guards with such a level of inspection. Pocoyo chuckled and told Pocoyen that it seemed the bank's chief manager was telling the truth, but Pocoyen was indignant and continued to claim that the one who stole the silver must have been one of the guards. He asked the man to ask him a few more questions and asked if any of the security guards had entered the warehouse with a flask of water, which surprised the manager even more. After thinking for a bit, the manager remembered that such a person really existed and asked if the Pokoi really wanted to say that it was he who hid the silver inside the flask. Although they checked the containers by holding them upside down and shaking them, Pocoyen explained to the chief manager that if the water froze, it would not spill out even if the flask was shaken. The guard most likely went into the warehouse, put in as much silver as he could, and froze it. The head manager couldn't even imagine this and he looked at the Pokoi in surprise. After this, Pocoyen suggested a secret inspection of the guard's house, and the chief manager immediately gave the appropriate command to his people. Afterwards, the manager began to thank Pocoyen and ask how he could have guessed this before, to which Pocoyen replied that he was simply lucky and he solved this riddle with the help of his psychic powers. Hearing this, the chief manager asked him to examine the cold in the warehouse, explained that this warehouse was strong, but the extreme cold caused them a lot of problems. Pocoyen felt uncomfortable refusing, but he explained that he was neither a Taoist nor a sorcerer, but the manager assured him that nothing terrible would happen if the guy failed to help and it was worth at least trying to find out something with the help of such powers. Pocoyen was a little upset because he had no choice. Pocoyen concentrated and tried to take control of the spiritual eye. He tried to tune himself so that he could see only what he wanted and when he wanted. He immediately learned about the box with the horseshoe and silver ingots, the tinder box, the pearl, the glow in the dark and the mechanical trap located inside the wall, for killing intruders. He also found that he did not feel any headache, and most likely due to the fact that he controlled his power and used it for a short time, and moreover, the amount of information received increased significantly. Thanks to this, he was able to find out that one of the ice stones that was part of the formation was slightly chipped. Pocoyen looked around to find the item and examine it. The stone immediately caught his eye and he was convinced that it was him because of the cold energy that was gathering in that crack. He decided to come closer and took a few steps towards this broken formation, but approaching it was not an easy task and the energy did not allow it to be done, blocking the way with severe frost and wind. However, when approaching her, Pocoyen noted that even if the formation was set up in the warehouse, it remained a formation and he could not block it with his bare hands, which was a big problem. He thought for a moment, touching her and receiving a negative influence. He touched it from the other side to confirm his suspicions, and after that he had to touch it again from the other side, because he could not believe what he saw. Pocoyen could control the energy within the formation, but he couldn't figure out how he could do it, based only on his upper dantian. He decided to use this unique skill for good. It was as if he grabbed the energy in his hand and threw it into the desired area. The chief manager almost jumped up from his seat from slight fear and surprise. Pocoyen himself was no less surprised, but was even more glad that he had succeeded. The chief manager immediately rushed to him with questions about how this was even possible. Pocoyen became a little alarmed and immediately began to ask for forgiveness, but the general manager, on the contrary, began to admire the fact that Pocoyen had released cold air, because he had not at all expected that this problem would be solved exactly like this. Pocoyen breathed a sigh of relief, because he thought that the manager would give birth because he had recklessly dissipated the energy that had accumulated in the formation. The manager noted that even the people from the Jekman Same Gu could not find a solution, but Pokoi did, which was very impressive. But Pokwe was tense, because such a conversation could bring trouble if the proud martial artist listened to it. Pokwe noted that he appreciated the gentleman's praise, but excessive praise made him feel awkward, for which the gentleman immediately apologized for the inconvenience caused. The manager noted that he would not mention this directly and promised that he would tell about the return of the stolen silver specifically to Pokwe-en. The chief manager also offered a reward and asked Pokwe-en if he had caught anything. This offer greatly surprised the young man and he noted that he was simply doing his duty, but Pokwe-o, upon hearing about the reward, immediately tried to dissuade him, pointing out that it was impolite to refuse when offered. The chief manager agreed with Pokwe-o's words, who whispered in Pokwe-yen's ear that it was worth asking for some drinks. After listening to her partner, Pokwe-yen asked the general manager for a martial arts manual, noting that he was still a little lacking and having a manual would be of help to him. Surprised that this is all the young man asks for, the chief manager promised that she would go with the best book she could. Pokwe-o in Ukraine is unhappy with his partner's choice, because he wanted to get a drink, but Pokwe-yen ignored his partner's words and thought only about the fact that this time he did not have to suffer from internal wounds, although there was no guarantee that he would be so lucky next time. He decided that this is why he needed to quickly find a martial arts manual, but suddenly a young man burst into the room shouting about an urgent matter. The chief manager asked what the matter was and the young man hesitated when he saw strangers, but he still decided that it was not worth postponing such news and said that he had arrived to visit from Jekmyeonsamgu, which stunned everyone present. The Jekmyeonsamgu was one of the 5 most prestigious clans in the martial arts world. It was a powerful family with unparalleled influence in this region. In particular, it was said that it was the most outstanding clan out of the 5 clans in the formation. Well, it wasn't like that for everyone. One of the members of this clan suffered the most from this status. On the way to the city, one of the craftsmen had an argument with his assistant. The craftsman was indignant that the assistant had to clean up the mess himself. The master hoped that no one would find out about anything, because not only the reputation of the Jekmyeonsamgu but also the power of the Iron Scorpion faction could not be ignored. Seeing that no one was meeting him, he asked his assistant if something had happened to the owner of the estate that could cause him to be late. The servant said that a thief had appeared in the warehouse and promised that the owner would arrive soon. As soon as the master heard about the thief, he immediately went berserk. He didn't want to believe that the thief had gotten inside because of the formation. He understood that if this was really the case, then this was a significant problem. Soon the chief manager approached the master together with Pokwe-yen and greeted him. The master immediately noticed the special look of the arriving Pokwe, which caused him to have many questions. This look reminded him of the look of the clan leader. Although he was confident in the status of the young man, he put away all similar thoughts, not understanding why he could even think about Pokwe in such a way, and turning to the manager and noting the appearance of the thief, he asked if the formation had stopped functioning. The manager reassured him, assured him that the pharmacy was working perfectly, which gave the martial artist relief, since he had managed to avoid the worst-case scenario. The foreman asked if they had caught the thieves on the spot, to which the manager replied that thanks to the letters that were next to them, they had managed to find him. Listening to the chief manager, the master who arrived was not at all convinced by what he heard. This mistrust was immediately caught by Pokwe-yen thanks to her talent. Finally, the manager said that they had managed to solve the problem with the information. The foreman was surprised that there had been any problem at all and asked how they had managed to solve it. The chief manager told about the stone that had a crack in it and that they had turned to the Taoist who was indebted to their estate. The master immediately tried to find out who exactly this man was by showing a desire to meet him, but the chief manager stopped him and said that this seemed to be the nobility of a Taoist master. This conversation intervened Pokwe-yen note that perhaps the divine mysterious wisdom of the Jekmyeonsamgu could help him find out which particular Taoist master was missing. Considering that since the problem with the crack was not completely solved, problems could arise again later. Pokwe-yen, looking at the master, could not understand why he was so grateful, and when he asked for help and promised to pay, he doubted a little. The chief manager agreed but asked to respect the nobility of the Taoist master to the fullest extent, which the master did not even argue with. Pokwe-yen thought to himself how persistent the arriving master was, and this aroused his curiosity. I appreciated his foresight but doubted whether everything would be okay. They took this master into the hall and showed him what he demanded. He touched the stone that had a crack in it to try to find out some details. The master could not believe his eyes that a crack had actually formed on the stone and he had made such a huge mistake. He said that he was lucky to find the cause and asked if it was possible to replace the ice stone. The head manager gave the go-ahead. The master was very humiliated, considering it a huge shame and humiliation, and decided to finish quickly and leave, so as not to experience such unpleasant emotions anymore. Pokwe-yen bowed to the master. Let us note that he was an honorable great hero who could find the reason with just one look. It was necessary to expect from the Jekmyeonsamgu. The master emphasized to himself that Pokwe was good at flattery. He thanked him silently and thought that if he had done two remarkable things, he definitely deserved to be rewarded. Pokwe observed the master's strange smile and did not understand why he was behaving like that, because he had simply been praised. After a short time, the martial artist finished correcting his mistakes and declared that everything was ready. He approached the manager and asked him not to hesitate to contact him if another problem arose, and promised to take full responsibility in the name of the Jackman Samegu. After which the master went out and finally addressed the Pokwe, inviting him to come to the hotel where he was staying. Pokwe wondered what was going on, but the master said that the young man would see it after he followed him and promised that it would not take long. Pokwe Yen did not understand what was happening because everything seemed normal when he tested him with insight. The master was very calm and without a trace of hostility, but Pokwe understood that he apparently did not see everything. He really hoped that the martial arts master had not exposed him and that he would not soon face harsh punishment. But the master and their art simply wanted to give Pokwe silver coins, and not being able to do this openly decided to give them to the hotel. To break the awkward silence between them, the master suddenly told that he was in such a hurry to get to this city that it was difficult to rent a room in another hotel, which made the Pokwe a little wary. Soon they reached the place where the master was staying. Pokwe Yen looked around and realized that this was definitely not the place where a warrior of the 5 great clans should stay. Pokwe noted that such economy was amazing and the master was not disturbed by pomp and ceremony, but received no answer. The master smiled, satisfied with such pleasant flattery, and thought that he almost wanted to hire Pokwe as a worker for the clan. But his thoughts about this were interrupted by a servant who suddenly came running. The young man began to say that they had problems, and the master, without changing his calm, measured tone, asked what had happened. The servant said that the bag with money in the room was missing, which shocked both the martial artist and the Pokwe. Smogla assumed that someone must have taken it when he stepped away for a while. The master was already furious at such news and asked the young man to repeat what he had said. The master immediately turned to the owner of the hotel and ordered him to call all the guests living on the 2nd floor, and he did not have the audacity to argue. After which the master asked his servant if anyone was missing from the hotel, and he replied that everyone was there. When the master inquired about the guests on the 1st floor, the servant said that the hotel was quiet and only a messenger passed by. The martial artist said out loud that he had returned quickly and the thief had no time to escape, but the situation was extremely unpleasant for him. Soon all the guests began to descend from the 2nd floor down the stairs and made noise, indignant about why they were called. The master, in a very sharp tone, ordered everyone to listen to him and explained that there was a Jokman Samegu whose money bag had been stolen by someone. He took out his sword and pointed a warning at the first guest standing closest. Everyone present seriously tensed up because they knew that this was not just an ordinary theft. The martial arts master threateningly declared that he would look for the thief. They started searching the entire hotel in search of the thief and that same lost bag, but they couldn't find anything. The services reported that they had thoroughly searched the guests' luggage and their rooms, but the search was fruitless. The martial artist thought to himself that he was mistaken, that it was indeed a thief and most likely some cunning person who hid his bag. The owner turned to the master and suggested that this daredevil could have been a Shinto and flown over the wall and stolen the bag, but the master considered this some kind of absurdity. He did not understand why a Shintos with his abilities would steal in such a hotel and was sure that one of the people present was blinded by greed upon seeing his things. Pokwe, watching what was happening, especially the master, noted that he was very smart, while the master himself demanded that each guest introduce themselves. The first to come out was a merchant selling brushes and ink sticks. He explained that his things only contained brushes made of ferret wool, brushes made of yellow goat wool, and ink sticks. In the summer, a night watchman came to the hotel to meet with a relative. I explained that his things only contained tools like a file and an awl. Afterwards, a girl came out of the crowd and introduced herself as a Kisaeng, and assured him that her belongings only contained one set of clothes and makeup powder. Seeing the girl, the martial arts master chuckled and asked why the Kisaeng needed to check into such a hotel, and she replied that she was waiting for her lover. The master demanded to be named, and the girl, having named the master Dahep, replied that she could not betray his name. She said that if she said his name, he could get angry like any other man, which made the martial artist feel a little uneasy. He was angry that right at that moment the courtesan threatened him by talking about some supposedly great man. He didn't fully understand whether she was bluffing or not, but the hint was still understood. The girl again turned to the master and noted that she had one suspect, which greatly surprised the master. She pointed her gaze at the man to the side and noted that if they searched the entire hotel and the rooms and still did not find the missing item, it was more likely that they should take him under suspicion. The servant she pointed at immediately began to sweat from fear. The master ordered the girl to be silent, noting that his servant had been with me since childhood. But the innkeeper intervened, pointing out that no one could be sure of his innocence to what percent. The merchant who was under suspicion said that in that case they should have called Pokeway because they couldn't continue to sort this out all day. The martial artist's gaze immediately fell on Pokeway Yen, who had arrived at the hotel with him. The master was abrupt and rudely asked what the young man was thinking about. He asked if he had noticed anything suspicious. Pokeway did not want to interfere in this until the last. He cleared his throat and asked for forgiveness. He thought for a second, after which he replied that he had thought about where the blacksmith could have hidden the silver. Not expecting such an answer, the master asked him again. Pokeway Yen asked to pay attention to the blacksmith's fingers. And if he really was a blacksmith, his nails should have had stains from the iron, but they were absolutely clean and the calluses were formed from work of a different kind. The martial arts master mentally agreed with the young man, scolding himself so that the thought of checking his hands would not come to his mind. Although he had the surname Sega, he did not think of it. The martial artist was very impressed by this remark and thought that Commander Gon was indeed right in telling about this young man. The master was surprised that this Pokeway actually found the thief, although it was hard to say that he had any impressive talents. After thinking a little more, Pokeway Yen noted that he remembered that Chom Swa helped the night watchman and the young man not far from them, whose name was called, immediately jumped up in place from fright. Pokeway noted that Chom Swa saw the servant leave the room, most likely sending a signal to the night watchman who was in the room on the first floor, and most likely if Chom Swa's room was opened well, it would be possible to find Chom. The martial artist was impressed by Pokeway's words and asked if he was talking about the culprit throwing the bag out of the window for someone else to pick it up. Pokeway replied that it was not that, but that the two had probably stolen more than once or twice. He explained that when throwing the bag out of the window there was a risk that a random passerby would become a witness and most likely he threw the bag to him inside the hotel when no one was around. He looked at Chom Soy, who was standing there completely frightened, and asked if it was true. The master of their art immediately placed a sword on the man's shoulder, blocking his path, and warned that if he moved, he would be struck. On the other side, a blacksmith approached them, clearly angry with the developing situation. He said that a non-entity like Pokeway did not dare to accuse anyone. Pokeway himself quickly realized that this man was trained in martial arts. Pokeway thought that everything would be fine. The rank was Eagle. He never expected that the thief would even master third-rank martial arts. The false blacksmith who is a thief immediately pounced on the Pokeway and I wanted to kill him with one swing. Pokeway was completely focused and tracking every slightest movement of his opponent. He could act ahead thanks to his talent. To the thief's surprise, Pokeway quickly jumped back, dodging his blow. This slightly misled the blacksmith, who was confident in his superiority. He jumped aside and threatened the innkeeper for standing in his way. The thief immediately began to advance on the Pokeway and jumped, striking again, but missed. Pokeway Yen found that everything was connected and through his spiritual vision he could predict the direction of the enemy's movement and thanks to this prediction he was able to defend himself with a table and a chair. Pokeway Yen was glad that he didn't even have a headache and decided that the key had been in the third eye focusing for not too long and it was worth acting in such a technique so as not to make things worse for himself. Uber did not retreat and only cursed more loudly that his opponent turned out to be too lucky for such a scoundrel. But Pokeway was not at all offended by such words about himself and he was focused only on eliminating the criminal. Finding the right time for something to attack again, Pokeway managed to react successfully and dodge once again. He tried to use only the energy from the lower dantian as much as possible in his case. This was very important for him, because if he went a little overboard with his strength, he would take away his health. Picking the best moment, Pokeway Yen attacked the thief, still controlling himself as much as he could. A very successful blow took the thief's breath away and he began to spit blood. This only made Pokeway happy, because he felt that everything was going according to his plan. When the thief fell to the floor, Pokeway was delighted with his latest success. The master was amazed and did not hide it. He was delighted that Pokeway knew martial arts and noted that he had an amazing talent and then asked what martial art he had learned. Pokeway replied that he had studied Jinkan Bogak, the basic technique of the defensive fist. Hearing this, the master thought to himself about its uselessness and that it was better not to ask about it. After this showdown, the innkeeper threw himself at the feet of the martial artist with apologies. He shouted that he could not even imagine that Chomwa would steal. Pokeway Yen told him that Chom Swa was so cunning that it was hard not to notice, and the master decided to let him go, because the bag was returned. The master handed Pokeway Yen a silver coin, calling the boy his friend and noting that he deserved the reward. Pokeway Yen accepted her and bowed, thanked her and replied that he felt great shame. Immediately after this, Pokeway Yen gave the award to the innkeeper, apologizing for the broken table and chair. Pokeway begged the master to take it as an apology, although the man refused in every way. Seeing that Pokeway wanted to give up his reward, the master was shocked. He approached Pokeway and touched his shoulder asking what he was doing. Pokeway, not understanding the problem, explained that he gave the money as an apology for the broken furniture. The master, hearing this, asked the innkeeper to return Pokway's money and promised that he would pay for the damage himself. He was amazed, because it was the first time he had encountered such a Pokway. They were distracted by a voice from behind. The man inquired about Ko's presence, claiming that he had heard it there. Turning around, the master and the Pokway found a tall young man with a sword over his shoulder. He looked quite self-confident and smiled slightly with his arms folded across his chest. Master and Pokway Yen seemed to freeze in place when they saw him. The martial artist called him by his name, Peng Heng. Pokway had heard the name, but had never met him before. Peng Heng was the great master of the Middle Hebei Peng family. His real name was Peng Chusong. The master asked the new arrival what had happened in the hotel. We will note the complete disorder. Another master tried to explain everything in order. He said that the blacksmith and the waiter had agreed to steal the money bag, which had already greatly surprised the guest who had arrived. At the end they started laughing loudly at each other at the reaction that happened. The martial artist assured the guest that in any case the thieves were caught thanks to Pokway Yun, and he noted that most likely this man was very amazing. After this, the master asked his recently arrived brother Pen what brought him to these parts, assuming that it was the White Lyceum divine thief, who immediately captured Pokway Yun's attention. Mr. Peng said that he did not come alone and that his close friends forced him to stay with them, including Miss Dang Li, which brought the master into complete delight. Looking at Pokway Yun's puzzled face, the master remembered that he probably didn't know about the white-faced divine thief and said that it was the thief who caused a big stir in the martial arts world 5 years ago. Thieves who overcame the risk of being caught and made a name for themselves could be honored with a nickname from two white faces, and the divine thief was one of them. He would have gained more fame if he hadn't crossed the Namgung family wall 5 years ago, according to the martial artist. Usually, rumors about dead thieves would soon disappear. However, over the last 6 months, rumors have begun to circulate among the people. The white-faced divine thief copied the secret martial arts manuals of the 9 great schools and 5 great families and hid them somewhere. These rumors, along with the circulating treasure maps, excited martial artists. Masters from non-prestigious orthodox schools became interested in them because of their greed for secret manuals. Masters from prestigious orthodox schools aimed to re-establish the secret leadership in order to gain recognition for their school or to avoid surveillance from other factions. But the martial artist stressed that he should not think about it. This rumor was completely groundless, and of course some gossips laugh watching people in confusion. Mr. Peng smiled and emphasized that the sound had no meaning, although there was always the slightest chance, and emphasized that his friends also wanted to come. The gentleman noted that he thought that even if this turned out to be a false rumor, he still had his brother Gyu who could help him, and asked if the master agreed to this. Master Gyu, his eyes full of delight, agreed, noting that since brother Peng had asked for it, it was worth supporting him. Via all this, Pokway Yan thought that the master certainly had many friends. After this, Master Peng suggested asking Pokway for help, emphasizing that the guy seemed very smart. This suggestion left Pokway Yan at a loss. Master Gyu began to praise Pokway, noting that he was not only smart but also had psychic strength. The gentleman interrupted him, noting that he did not understand anything about this and it was important to him that the guy was talented. For Pokway Yan, this was very unexpected, and of course he wanted to meet martial arts masters because of his desire to train, but he didn't really like the place filled with masters whose eyes were red from greed. He decided to politely decline and said that their offer was an honor for him, but he had responsibilities as a Pokway, as a man who was fulfilling his national duty and receiving a salary. He did not dare to be lazy. Master GB turned to Master Pan and said that Pokway Yen was truly unsurpassed and did not take bribes and even spent his own money to help unfortunate merchants. Seeing the face of the other master, Pokway understood that he would look like an honest official who only cared about the people. Master Pokway emphasized that it was truly amazing because he had met more than a dozen pokes, but this was the first time he had seen such a person. Pokway Yen became embarrassed and thanked the master for his excessive praise. Master G suggested to his brother to go straight to the elder Pokway and ask to borrow his skills from Pokway Yen. After this, the masters began to exchange pleasantries, while Pokway Yen stood dumbfounded by such news and realizing that he would not be able to get out of this matter. These masters turned out to be very annoying to Pokway Yen and he did not know where to go from them. After all the discussions and agreements at the hotel, the martial arts masters and Pokway Yen went across the city to the elder Pokway. Many were not ashamed to fear them, especially Pokway Yen, who was incomprehensible to anyone to be next to such great masters. Pokway Yen looked around and guessed that perhaps the rumors of the master had already spread everywhere. Eventually they stopped at one of the houses. Mr. Mayor explained that his friends were waiting there. Pokway Yen looked around the building and mentally noted that the house was nicer than he had imagined. When they entered inside, Peng Hang's friends perked up at finally seeing their friend who had been missing for a long time, but everyone was surprised by Ji Yi's presence, although some suggested that Peng Hang had brought him along because he needed the wisdom of the Juga family. These words convinced Pokui Yan that Master Gyu really had no friends, unlike his friend, but what excited the masters more than Master Gyu was the presence of Pokui. Master Peng immediately left his friends, noting that he obviously had not come presumptuously to arrest some master. He told his friends that Pokui had a truly extraordinary talent that was used for the good of the state. Pokui was worried, realizing that such praise would only make things worse, and tried to stop the master. Well, this only angered the masters even more, who thought that the pathetic Pokui had no right to interrupt the speech of Pen's brother. Pokui Yan felt as if he was sitting on a bed of thorns and realized that the masters seemed more like Pen's subordinates than his close friends. Pokui Yan also understood that undoubtedly people from the 5 great families could not be equal to people from other families, but he was still worried about the true friends of this master. His gaze fell on the girl standing to the side. He guessed that she might be from the Sichuan-Tang family, one of the 5 great families. He had seen her somewhere before. He also emphasized to himself that judging by Juga Gu's emotions, the girl was that very Miss Tang Ling. Looking around even better, he noticed another master in the center. It was a girl who was very calm compared to the others. Pokui Yan immediately recognized that she was from the Peng Jicheng family. Master Pan saw where Pokui Yan was looking and smiled and explained that the girl was his younger sister and asked if he had already figured it out. Pokui Yan didn't know what to answer and said that he couldn't have known about such a thing. After this, Master Pan explained to his acquaintances that he brought Pokui Yan with him because he could explain the situation and someone like him was truly amazing. Master Pan's younger sister noted that from what she knew, Pokui possessed remarkable psychic powers. She said that once a mysterious incident happened to her and she wondered if Pokui Yan could solve it. After thinking for a while, Pokui Yan asked the girl to tell him more about it. She told the story of a couple who ran a fabric store and one day went on a long journey to meet family. Pokui Yan found everything easy and, without finishing the conversation, he asked if the husband in this story had killed his wife. This question astonished the lady. She did not understand how the young man had guessed the criminal so quickly and even figured out the crime before she had finished speaking. Pokui understood that everyone would think about his psychic powers, but it was impossible to continue like this. It was the ability to thoroughly absorb information from his surroundings. It could not help him in control or reading thoughts. He understood that there was no guarantee that he would always be able to convince people even if he solved cases, and so he decided that he would first show his strong and amazing side. In the form of the lady's facial expression, he decided that then if the interlocutor was too surprised or was full of doubts and provided a true similar reason, then he himself would overestimate his abilities. After these quick thoughts, Pokui Yan asked the lady for forgiveness for frightening her and explained that since she was talking to someone like him, then most likely one of the heroes of the story had to die. He assumed that if he hadn't interrupted, the girl would have told him that the couple who ran the fabric store and went on a trip stopped in the nearest village to spend the night there and the lady suffered a misfortune. He was sure that the murderer was the lady's husband, and in such a situation the suspects in the murder of the lady are limited to a narrow circle of people. Moreover, none of the villagers wished harm to this couple, and also if it was about money, then the husband should have died too. Now he had to fabricate a reason why he found out all this without listening to the rest of the story, explaining that if someone died during a long journey, he would think that it was due to robbers or a serious illness, in which case the lady would not ask. But his explanation surprised the lady even more, because he spoke as if she had known the whole background of this story from the very beginning. Pokui Yan added that then he thought that the lady was killed by her husband and the murder was covered up, but the lady asked what it was like in a case where a wife killed her husband and Grant. Pokui continued to talk about how since the couple was going to meet relatives, he thought that it was highly likely that the husband had initiated the conversation. The lady confirmed this and asked how Pokui understood that she knew everything that had happened. Pokui noted that there was nothing complicated about it, because as a person who inherited the blood of the great Hebei family, Peng could ask about such things without knowing anything himself. The girl smiled and said that Pokui was overpraising her. She emphasized that the prestige of the Hebei Peng family was high, but there was no room for wisdom in it. Returning to the story of the couple, she asked what Pokui thought should be done. The girl pointed out that the district judge was incompetent and could not solve the mystery, so she was simply overlooked. And by the time she heard about the story, it was too late to question her husband without any evidence. Pokui Yan thought for a while and then asked who and where first found the lady's body, to which Mrs. Pei replied that her husband found her in the bushes near the village. Having received the answer, Pokui asked if it was not strange that it was her husband who found her and not a villager familiar with the surrounding area, and it was worth questioning him for this reason. Mrs. Pei smiled, noting that they had brought to her a very capable Pokwe. After these words, Master Peng approached Pokwe Yen. I am glad that with such skill he deserved to know about the current situation and offered to tell him everything they learned. The lady said that in fact they generally knew where the treasures of the white-faced divine thief were located. First of all they checked the time and place of the beginning of the spread of rumors, received several treasure maps, confirming what they pointed to. Listening to Mrs. Pokwe, Yen noted that they were much smarter than he thought, because initially he believed that this was nothing more than a gathering of frivolous young geniuses in martial arts. Then the lady said that they also checked the new treasure map and the location was the same. It was a mountain fortress located on Mount Palkan, but if they move there, they may encounter mountain bandits. Master Gu noted that no matter how he looked, the rumors and the treasure map raised many suspicions about whether there really was a secret manual there. Master Peng replied that it was worth going and checking, and if they failed, they would deal with the bandits. Pokwe tried to put together the mountain fortress treasure map and the secret manual, realizing that something had definitely happened, but he still couldn't remember what exactly. All his thoughts were filled with this mountain fortress and he tried to grab hold of every thought that visited him in order to solve this riddle for himself. He clearly understood that something unpleasant had happened in this mountain fortress, but he still couldn't come up with a single guess. Without talking about it for too long, a group of martial artists headed to the mountain fortress to see everything with their own eyes. The road led through the forest. They moved along the path, making their way through branches and thickets of grass. Crows circled above them, as if watching. Pokwe was not bothered by the abundance of various insects that were trying to land on him, and he walked last in the row, constantly brushing them off, but having lost his vigilance a little and simply walking straight ahead, he ran right into one of the masters in front, who immediately began to curse and chase him away, like some kind of leper. But Pokwe did not pay any attention to these curses, because he was distracted by the arrow of the enemies, which flew straight at the master, and quickly grabbed him by the clothes and pulled him to the side, not allowing him to get hurt. Master Gu intercepted the arrow and began to examine it while Pokwe tried to lift the master. Mrs. Pei, seeing what happened, was very surprised by Pokwe's quick reaction, which was better than that of a martial artist. Master Gu removed a note from the arrow, which contained a warning that if the detachment went further, then by an oath in the name of No Krim, everyone would die. One of the masters was indignant that the mountain bandits did not even conclude a blood pocky, nicknamed the 72 Fortresses of the No Krim, tables, so to speak. Pokwe asked Miss Pei what level of martial arts the local bandits were at. She said that most of them probably had not studied martial arts and their skills were hardly noteworthy. She noted that the leader of these bandits was possibly of the second rank and this was even a high assessment for him. Master Pei suddenly ordered everyone to be silent, noting that the bandits were approaching. As soon as he sensed and heard the danger, Pokwe also felt that these were not such ordinary bandits. He listened to them running, the whole crowd gathering together. He felt that all the mountain bandits approaching them knew martial arts, which was very different from the opinion of the masters. Very soon the battle began and everyone realized that defeating the bandits was not so easy. Pokwe thought that the bandits must have been low level and didn't understand why the fight against them was so difficult, hoping that they were simply fighting in a disadvantageous position. Suddenly, from the side, Pokwe heard a bandit addressing him, who was surprised by the presence of a government official. This bandit had a second-class martial arts background and Pokwe didn't understand why he chose him as his target among all the masters. Pokwe missed several blows that rained down one after another and did not even have time to dodge. He felt that the bandit had incredible strength and if he made a mistake he could easily kill him. He tried to calm down, although it was very difficult. Pokwe tried to concentrate his spiritual eye as much as possible in order to have at least a small chance of preserving his life. This helped him and he identified the weak points of his opponent, which now gave him an advantage in the fight against him. This bandit had a gap in his movements and Pokwe decided to immediately take advantage of this by entering the battle in full. But this resistance only angered the bandit even more, who was not satisfied with the fact that some government official dared to try to overcome him. He began to curse, trying in every way to hit Pokwe, who every now and then began to successfully dodge, although Pokwe himself did not like that he only splashed the bandit, and did not cause him damage. Pokwe felt that the energy had changed afterwards, which could mean that the bandit was preparing for a new movement. Afterwards he felt that the range of motion had greatly expanded and he became slightly agitated, not understanding why this was happening and only having guesses about the hidden technique. The bandit did not think about confusion, but only used more of his strength to attack Pokwe and promising him death, and Pokwe understood that it was too late for him to escape. He very quickly made the decision to take the blow, since he didn't really have any other choice and he was ready for it. He used the morning energy of the upper dandian. He ordered her to open up, hoping it wouldn't hurt him too much. As soon as the enemy's sword approached him, He struck the blade with his fist and was able to break it, a piece of insidious metal. He was able to do it. The dandian and acupuncture points that he had not even trained were torn apart and his life energy was shaking. In a normal situation he would have stopped there, but he was in completely different circumstances and had no right to stop. He knew for sure that he couldn't unscrew it and he needed to go to the end in this fight. He summoned even more energy and attacked the bandit, although he was afraid of the further consequences for his inner body. Pokwe Yen was very surprised that he was able to release the internal energy from the upper dandian when his life was hanging by a thread. He noted that fortunately he was not too seriously injured, otherwise he could have instantly fallen unconscious and decided to start circulating internal energy. He heard Master Pan's cry as he ran towards him as fast as he could. As the master approached him, Pokwe Yen asked if all the bandits had been defeated, to which he received the answer that only one remained, swinging a chain with a high level of martial arts, and everyone was wondering where he had gone. When the master saw the defeated bandit, he was surprised how it was possible, to which Pokwe Yang said that he had a hidden Gemen's and he was very lucky. The master noted that there could be no luck, and the climb was only for the strongest. Master Pei laughed, because he did not foresee this. Although Pokwe had a hidden movement and ordinary people of Hanzhen should definitely be calm. But the man on the side said that he was dissatisfied. Pokwe Yan could not sense his presence and stood, along with the other masters, dumbfounded by the appearance of this man. The cold hand of the snake Gosong emerged from the shadows. He showed his dissatisfaction and arrogance looking at the masters. Many people have heard of the cold hand of the snake Gosong. He was an evil demon who had mastered the demonic art called the Ice Demon Hand to the extreme. Master Pei had heard that he was known for his cruel nature and was said to have meted out inhumane punishments to anyone who got in his way. Most masters who mastered such demonic arts were immediately killed by assassins, but he must master martial arts at a level that he can survive. Without a doubt, this was a person who was still at the peak of cultivation, and Master Pei, who was only at the first level of cultivation, could not deal with him. Besides, there was a high probability that they would not win even if everyone attacked this man's mind, and the master did not understand what he could do. He simply asked what brought the master to them. The old man grimaced, surprised that he was not called by his nickname as usual. Most people took these words as a threat. Master Pei noted that he brought his brother Gu with him and asked the master to take out all his anger on himself if he failed. But the master only ordered him to get wet, noting that if he was going to die here, he would die along with everyone else. Master Pei began to beg him not to kill anyone for the sake of the Hebei Peng family, the Zhuge family, and the Sichuan clan, to which the old man only snorted. With eerie calmness, the gentleman asked who killed his subordinates, and Master Pei became even more worried, realizing who he had crossed. He had seen the exceptional skills of the mountain bandits, but never had they acted under Gosong's leadership. The master understood that it would hardly be a matter of just talking and that he would have to risk his life. Pokwe Yen intervened and asked if these bandits hadn't recently started working for the master, despite the fact that he still considered them his subordinates. He noted that some of them had rope sandals and ropes tied to the back of their belts, but the skin was uniformly tanned and there were calluses on the toes that were not often seen on normal people. These people did not come from far away and were not originally mountain bandits from this fortress, and Pokwe Yen emphasized his confidence that the master began giving them commands after arriving at the fortress. The gentleman confirmed this and asked why martial artists would take an official with them on a journey, assuming that they had been caught doing something illegal. Master Pei immediately began to explain who Pokwe Yen was. Pokwe Yen hoped that the masters would accept this lie, because it was clear from the master's face that he thought he had fallen for some kind of fraudulent trick. The gentleman listened to everything and snorted, calling the speech about an outstanding and honest official complete nonsense that he had never heard of, but noted that he believed in his psychic powers, thanks to which he had figured out the true face of the bandits. After this, the gentleman asked if the masters knew why he remained in the secluded mountain fortress, to which Pokwe Yen stated that he would like to know about it. He said that the reason was revealed in the secret manual hidden by the white-faced divine thief. The master's surprised faces asked them not to pretend ignorance, being sure that they had also heard these rumors, otherwise they would not have come to conquer the empty mountain fortress. The gentleman added that he spared the mountain bandits in life so that they would serve him out of boredom, taught them some movements and they began to behave as if they belonged to a certain no-crim. After which he laughed that not all of them died shamefully. The gentleman reminded about the request to consider the names of the families, but did not explain that it was difficult for him to deal with one family, so he could not make 3 of them his enemies at once. When the gentleman paused briefly, literally everyone felt the danger hanging over them, especially Pokwe Yen. The master suggested that the masters return home and bring with them martial artists from noble families to try to take the secret manual he was looking for. After this, his face took on a very creepy look and he said that before this happens, he must kill them all. After a short silence, Master Pei asked the gentleman if he was talking about killing them all just to keep them silent. The gentleman replied that he was considering this option. He added that even if he kills them all and gets rid of their bodies, he might be exposed in the future, but if he allows them to live, they will definitely try to steal the leadership. Master Peng assured that he would not do this and promised that such a thing would never happen. The master asked if he looked like a fool who would believe this. He assumed that most likely, upon seeing him, they thought that the rumors about the secret leadership of the white-faced divine thief were true, which is why the master did not want to let anyone go alive. He said loudly that they had only one option left. They should not find the secret manual. Only if they found it would their lives be spared. He turned to one of the masters and called him a boy from the Chkje family. I promised that I would not lay a finger on him only because I believed in his mental abilities. No one understood how they were supposed to find the manual if they only knew the location. The master asked if the gentleman had any other clues besides the map, to which he replied that if he had any, he would not have thrown around numerous copies of the map. The master was horrified that there were no more clues and mentally forgave with his life, but Pokwe Yan suddenly intervened in the conversation, declaring that he had found the guide. Everyone immediately stared at him, although the gentleman didn't even bat an eye at this statement and asked doubtfully where it was. When Gosong used one of his martial art techniques, many thought that they could not have guessed that the master's skill was at such a high level. At that time, the martial arts of the orthodox factions focused on building a strong foundation and inner essence, and put the frequency of internal energy first. The martial arts of the non-orthodox factions gave preference to techniques that could be used in real combat and the rapid accumulation of a huge amount of internal energy. As a result, the person's mastery of non-orthodox martial arts increased. At that time, the imbalance of technique and impurity of internal energy prevented the ascent to higher levels. That was why Master Pei was convinced that Gosong's skill was at a level lower than that of an expert from the orthodox school, although he had lost the ability to crush people despite his skill level with his killing intent alone. The gentleman turned to Pokwe and asked if he had any idea how many years had been spent combing every centimeter of the area around the mountain fortress. And yet he dares to say that he found the leadership without taking a single step or looking around. Pokwe confirmed this and stated that he should first ask the question of whether it was possible that the white-faced and divine thief was from the mountain fortress. The gentleman was shocked by such a question and asked the Pokwe how he knew this information, to which he replied that the fact that they did not stop near the fortress meant that he was extremely confident. He explained that this is why he thought that his beliefs were based on the fact that the white-faced divine thief was originally from this very place. And besides, if the thief were hiding his treasure, he would most likely hide it in a place familiar to him. The gentleman thoughtfully agreed with Pokwe's words and shared that he had known the thief when he was still alive. Mr. Gosong heard the secret leadership's arrangement from him personally. That day, they had tea one-on-one. She told the thief about her homeland and noted that he hid everything in his hometown. Then the gentleman laughed at him for holding back on the trinkets and gold and that it would have been better for him to simply spend them, noting that apparently he would not live longer than 10 years. But the thief explained that he was talking specifically about the secret manual. The master then snorted at this, thinking about how great it must have been for it to be stolen by such a scoundrel as the divine thief. The divine thief was confident in himself, claiming that even the art of Brahma no fell into his hands, but when the thief said, "What kind of art was it?" the gentleman immediately became interested, because it was very difficult to believe. The art of Brahmanet was an extremely strange and unique martial art practiced by the monks of Tibet. This art was able to purify polluted and muddy internal energy. The gentleman immediately thought that for a follower of a non-orthodox school, such as he was, who had accumulated a lot of impure internal energy and was beginning to feel its boundaries, this guidance was simply necessary. The divine thief said that he copied it from the Shaolin library and laughed that those bald monks probably didn't even know that it was stolen. The master immediately began to demand that the manual be sold to him, threatening death if he refused. The divine thief grinned and explained to the master that if he killed him, the leadership would never be able to find him. Moreover, he wouldn't even be able to get into the library. The gentleman asked what the thief wanted, but he replied that he didn't need anything, but he couldn't just give up the leadership, because the gentleman was grieving for his skills and said that he would die within 10 years. The divine thief proposed a bet that if he did not die within 10 years, the master would have to apologize for not wanting to acknowledge the skills of the great white-faced divine thief and would then receive the art of Brahmanet. I understand that he had no choice. The gentleman agreed and also asked how he could obtain this art in the event of his death and then received information that all the treasures were hidden in the Palganch fortress. However, the white-faced divine thief met a futile and terrible death. As soon as the Lord learned of this, he went to the Palganch fortress and began searching for leadership, but could not find it. Looking at the Pokwe, Mr. Gosong was convinced that he was definitely gifted, otherwise he would not have been able to know about it. Pokwe Yun observed Gosong's internal dialogue and noticed that he had already calmed down a little and noted that as soon as he saw the steep cliff and the birds sitting on it, he remembered a certain incident. There were 22 corpses lying at the bottom of the cliff and the cause of their death was a fall from a height. All the dead martial artists were buried there. But Pokwe was curious about why they died in that particular place. A strange event occurred in which the masters fell into the hands of their death while climbing a cliff, and the answer to this was that the cause of death was in the secret manual hidden in a bird's nest on top of the cliff. The birds attacked the masters and they died in their attempts to take over the leadership. It was the nest of a stone bird. It was a monstrous species of bird, for they ate hard stones and built their nests from the soft bark of trees, and if an enemy entered their territory they would not pelt him with stones and peck him to death. Pokwe thought that no matter how capable the master was, such an ambush on the cliff would be fatal for him. Only a psycho would hide the secret manual in a nest at the top of the cliff. So Pokwe decided that in that case the thief must have been from these parts, and the reason why Gosong was so obsessed with this place must be because he personally heard it from the thief. Pokwe turned to the master and asked him to look in that direction, asking whether the bandits tried not to approach that rock. He noted that the stone bird had built a nest there because it was an evil creature that ate stones and killed its prey with them. But the gentleman still did not see the connection. Pokwe continued, adding that the bird tore off a pair of trees and made a nest out of it, and the white-faced thief was a bandit who had lived in this place for a long time and definitely should have known about the habits of stone birds. And then the gentleman understood what Pokwe was getting at. Pokwe confirmed his guesses and explained that the thief had torn up the secret manual and given parts of it to the stone birds, and the nest itself could be considered the secret manual. Pokwe advised checking the color of the nests right above the cliff, being convinced that there should be one of a different color there. Having examined all the nests, it was immediately noticeable that there was still a nest there that was not like the others. The gentleman immediately went to him and, having killed the birds, reached his goal. He clutched the fragments of the manual in his hand, immensely happy that he had managed to become the art of Brahmanet, but the gentleman did not forget about the one who helped him and thanked Pokwe, although he assured that the gentleman had overpraised him. One of the masters whispered to Pokwe what would happen if the master did not keep his word, but Pokwe was convinced that this would not happen thanks to his spiritual guidance. He could definitely tell that Gosong's words were sincere. In addition, the art of Brahmanet was a martial art of Shang and a copy of its version, so the gentleman thought that when following from Shaolin it would not be too serious. He had no reason to risk his life to kill warriors from the 5 great families. As a reward, Mr. Gosong threw his whip at him, which he used to break the nest built by the stone birds. It was a whip named White Snake Horn Breaker. The gentleman said that it was made after killing a giant white snake from the 5-element mountain and soaking it in its poison. The gentleman noted that this whip would save Pokwe's life at least once. Pokwe started talking about how he couldn't accept this whip, and the gentleman, deciding that the young man simply didn't have the technique of using a whip, gave him the necessary guidance. He explained that the manual contained the techniques he had created and that it lacked individual meditation techniques, but it was still better than some third-rate martial art. Pokwe still wanted to refuse it, but Master Pei intervened and tried to convince the young man to accept the gift, but immediately everyone discovered that the master had already gone somewhere, leaving in his place the whip of leadership given to Pokwe. Master Pei asked why Pokwe tried to refuse the gift. Even though it was not a martial art and not from a famous orthodox school, it was still very useful, and the other master suggested that he was worried about the fact that Gosong gave him the art of Aiknut. Pokwe Yen turned to the martial arts masters and smirked, telling them that the manual that the master had taken was most likely a fake. He knew that there were a few more clues in the original file. Well, one of them was the distinctive color of the nest, and after a careful study of its components, it was clear that the manual was fake. Pokwe Yen asked the masters to think for themselves, because the white-faced divine thief was caught and executed while trying to climb the walls of the Namgung clan. This could not happen to a man who entered the great library of Shaolin. Therefore, it was most likely a fake manual created by the white-faced divine thief who painted that nest so that Gosong would come and take it away. There was no reason to paint the nest a different color to make it easier to find your own treasure in the first place. And probably the real secret manual must be in other nests. The martial artists agreed with Pokwe. One of them began to check the nests and noted that the contents were difficult to read, but the letters on the cover were legible. After checking, he realized that they were mostly martial arts from small clans. Master Gu emphasized that there were most likely no martial arts from either the 5 great families or the 9 great schools. Overall, It was a relief that the white-faced divine thief did not have the skills to steal a worthy manual. Master Pei took it upon himself to return the manual to its owner and asked Pokoi if he happened to know why the white-faced divine thief hid the fake manual. Pokoi suggested that it might be because his pride had been hurt. Master Pei's suggestion was slightly different in that the effeminate thief would be ashamed that everyone would know that he did not have the art of Brahmanet. So the thief hid the fake manual for a while. And if he found the real one, he would plan to show it off to Gosong, laughing at him for not being able to find it even if it was just hidden. Pokoi noted that this was an interesting thought, after which Master Pei said that he had heard rumors that the art of Brahmanet was in the possession of the Namgun family. He shared that he had always wondered why the white-faced divine thief would break into the Namgun clan. In any case, it was a misfortune for Gosong, who should have learned a lesson not to trust a thief's words. Another of the masters corrected that the real lesson was that if you try to control an intelligent person like Pokoi by force, you can face failure. After this, the craftsman decided not to linger and to return home as soon as possible. Soon all the masters decided to split up and first said goodbye to Master Pei, thanking him for his good work. Before leaving everyone, Master Pei approached Pokoi Young and asked him to give him a little time. He noted that Pokoi seemed very interested in training martial arts and explained that as a reward for his support he wanted to help him with his training. Pokoi liked this very much because it would be very nice to learn martial arts from a master. Master Pei asked Pokoi to show one of his forms and immediately decided to do so. Master Pei looked at the Pokoi and noted that his understanding of the form was close to ideal, but he definitely lacked internal energy. And if this problem could be solved, he could rise to the level of a second-class master. Pokoi replied that he also felt a lack of energy, but he did not know of any way, to which the master stated that there was such a way. This interested Pokoi. He assumed that it was the art of the heart. He understood that the master would not simply give away the heart of his clan. He did not assume that perhaps the master knew another way. Although Pokoi believed that the Vigyuk heart art was so ineffective that any other was far superior to it, but Master Pei took out and presented his clan's jade dew pill. Pokoi was extremely surprised that the master showed him the clan's elixir and did not believe that he could take it, because it was one of their main treasures. The master of Pokoi's video of doubt confirmed that he could take it. The master explained that with one such elixir created according to the secret formula of his clan, Pokoi could earn as much internal energy as he could accumulate in 10 years. Another master assured Pokoi that he could safely eat it, and even though it was created according to the clan's secret formula, there was no prohibition against giving it to outsiders. Everyone understood why Pokoi was worried and explained that such a pill had once been given to an outsider. Pokoi doubted whether it was worth trusting this master, but he forcefully shoved the pill into Pokoi's mouth, laughing at him and advising him to swallow it quickly and start circulating the energy. Pokoi found that the elixir instantly dissolved in his mouth, turning into powerful energy, and he experienced the same feeling when he forcibly released the energy of his upper dantian. But the difference was that the energy from the jade dew pills did not cause any internal wounds, but flowed smoothly through all the meridians and pressure points in his body. It was said that a person would usually gain a 10-year supply of internal energy after taking one jade dew pill, but only if he completely absorbed the elixir. However, it was not that simple, and he had to use high-level hard art to gather as much elixir energy as could fit in his dantian. With the low-level hard art that Pokoi had learned, it was difficult to achieve. The master, watching Pokoi, thought that such an effect was achieved through his upper dantian and then asked if the guy felt the difference. Pokoi definitely felt the difference and confirmed it by thanking the master. He felt that he was exhausted but felt invigorated, and there was definitely a difference from before. The master explained that he had to be prepared because when a person suddenly acquired a surge of internal energy, he had to immediately begin to move in order to adapt to it. Pokoi wanted to deny that he had never felt such a powerful force in his body, but the master assured him that the body was deceiving him. Suddenly he felt in his body what the master had told him about earlier. His legs began to involuntarily gain strength. This surprised many people very much, because usually the energy was distributed evenly, but Pokoi himself was stunned by what was happening to his body and could not explain it to himself. Soon Pokoi, after grueling training, was left lying on the ground, no longer able to rise. The master asked if she could ask a question, and Pokoi assured her that she could ask anything. The master noted that as far as she knew, there was nothing special in the footwork of Vigyug, but the one used by Pokoi seemed a little different. Pokoi explained that it was the work of the white snake that Mr. Go had given him. He said that when he needed to move forward quickly he used the white snake footwork, and in all other situations he used the Vigyuk footwork. He explained that he had mixed both techniques to use them together, which confused the martial artist. She was surprised that the young men managed to combine martial arts to create a new one, and then he suggested out loud that this was possible because his upper dantian was open, which she greatly envied. "I don't want envy in my direction." Pokoi said that people with an open upper dantian tend to die at an early age, which is why the master was apparently not notified. She asked for forgiveness and decided to give him a gift, saying that she didn't need this book anyway, but Pokeway could help a lot. She explained that she received this book from the master of Taoist Wudong, and this would be your art not of Wudong, but of Taoist. This book was created in a school called Palvolmon, and the book was passed down through generations. One day ghosts began to appear. So it was decided to pass the book on to Yudin. Pokeway Yen is not sure that the girl could have given him this book just like that. The master assured that she received it as a reward for helping the master of Taoist Wudong with her older brother some time ago. She said that she hoped that she could master this art, but no matter how much she tried, in the end, she failed. I would not want to just throw away the book. She asked Pokeway to try to learn it, noting that it was not a dangerous art of Juado, and she had already heard that the art was similar to the art of spirit descent. The girl said that it was not exactly a summoning of a spirit, but a borrowing of a small share by the power of a divine immortal. Hearing this, Pokeway only hoped that everything would be fine, although he strongly doubted it. After leafing through the book, he discovered that there were a lot of difficult words in it and decided to use the same method as when reading the work of the White Snake's Legs. He used his talent of the spiritual eye and studied the book with it. The hieroglyphs seemed to be chewed under the influence of his talent. The entire flow of information immediately began to be absorbed into his head, filling his mind and body with energy. After studying, he realized that it was an art that allowed him to borrow the power of the master of the southern ladle star of one of the divine immortals. The spirit descent art that borrowed power doubled the internal energy and stamina until the power was completely exhausted after one use. The amount of power it absorbed was much less compared to using the spiritual eye. He thought that he would not wish for anything if only martial arts were at least half as easy as this, and told the master that he understood what kind of art was given to him. The lady asked to show it to her, and Pokeway immediately, without listening to her, decided to do it. But another of the masters hurried to him with an offer to warm up together. This upset him a little, because he understood that these damn masters simply would not let him breathe until they fully knew what he was capable of. After these trainings, Pokeway Yen hurried back to his city. He walked tiredly along the familiar streets, hoping for rest. He was met by an acquaintance who was concerned about his tired appearance and asked if everything was okay. Pokeway Yen assured that everything was fine with him and thanked him for being relieved on patrol. To which his friend noted that Pokeway Yen would soon become a pod and it was only a joy to help him. But Pokeway Yen was indignant at this remark, emphasizing that he still had a long way to go before becoming a pod, although he intended to rise higher. First he wanted to become a pod, and then a judge, and after that an assistant to the commander of the regional department. I doubted. I think that it was too absurd. Well, becoming a judge also suited him very much. The friend noted that there was also an opportunity for Pokeway Yen, and the other pods were inexperienced and not as impressive as the teacher. So from the judge's point of view, he needed 1 or 2 smart pods. Pokeway pointed out that if there was a problem he only had stupid pods and they could all die together, so the judge most likely thought it would be a good idea to add one young and talented Pokeway to their ranks. Pokeway Yen suggested that in that case he could continue in the same spirit and rise to the bottom. His friend laughed at him, noting that the other Pokeway would forever stand in his way, which prompted Pokeway Yen to think about getting rid of the rest. His friend jumped up and down from the statement of such a crazy idea, and Pokeway Yen calmed him down, saying that he was just asking. In that case, Pokeway Yen should have offered the judge a bribe, although he had no money and apparently had to get ahead only by skill. He decided that if he got another good case, he could succeed. He wanted to turn to his friend Pokeway, but he heard a female voice behind him. The girl blinked her eyes in delight, noting that she could never have thought that they would meet in such a place. Pokeway Yen did not immediately recognize who was standing in front of him and was a little confused. But fortunately, I remembered that this girl was a Kisang from that day at the inn, although she looked a little different now. Pokeway Yen smiled and apologized for not recognizing her, noting that her face looked different from their last meeting. Hearing what his friend was saying, Pokeway poked him in the side, warning him that he shouldn't have said that. Pokeway Yen himself realized that he was commenting on her makeup when it was difficult to predict what high-ranking official or influential figure she could be close to, and besides, based on her outfit, one could tell that she was an important Kisang. Pokeway Yen apologized again and explained that he was in a state of shock that time and did not remember her face very well. The girl laughed and noted that she understood everything exactly like that. She immediately after this stated that she had come because she wanted to ask a favor of such a capable Pokeway and asked if he would mind going with her. Pokeway immediately began to dissuade him, insisting on his refusal. He whispered in his ear that if Pokeway Yen went with this girl, he might die. Pokeway Yen didn't understand what his friend was talking about, and he emphasized that in such a big city there definitely had to be non-orthodox or dark factions. He was convinced that the Kisang definitely had a connection with them and would most likely have asked to cover up the traces of the murder or would have made a request of this kind. Pokeway Yen doubted that this girl could ask him for such a request. Meanwhile, The girl heard everything that Pokway talked about. Pokwayo continued to insist that Pokway Yen should have gone with her but made up an excuse and refused to return. Pokway Yen listened to his friend and thanked him for the advice. He suggested that they go together in that case, but Pokwayo noted that at least one of them should survive in order to take revenge later, although it was clear that he was simply either lazy or afraid. Pokwayo finished speaking and immediately ran up and disappeared into the crowd, leaving behind not the best opinion of Pokway Yen. The girl at that time said that they definitely would not ask Pokway to cover up the traces of something murdered. These words confused Pokway a little, because he realized that she heard the whole conversation. Pokway Yen found that unlike that evening he felt the presence of a martial artist and decided to use the spiritual eye again. Pokway Yen clearly saw that her face had changed slightly and there was great power hidden in her voice. Upon discovering this, Pokway Yen asked the girl if it was possible to assume that she was from Homun. It was a poorly organized school, led by low-level martial artists. The main people in the school were cabbies, waiters, and kisaeng, so outsiders constantly made fun of them, and there were also masters who were unknown to the general public. The girl who spoke to Pokway Yen was probably one of these masters. She confirmed this and introduced herself as Li Jiao, known as the Drunken Phoenix of the Homun, and asked how the young man understood this. He replied that she was a master practitioner of martial arts, so since she disguised herself as a kisaeng using the e-cancel skill, she was probably from Homun. Pokway Yen heard that the crowd not far from them was vigorously discussing him, not mincing words and not thinking about the fact that he himself heard everything. The girl interrupted his thoughts and explained that she had come to him because she needed his superior wisdom. Listening to her, he decided that the girl did not seem suspicious and inquired whether someone had died or whether the treasure had disappeared. The girl explained that one of the kisaeng in the entertainment house had fallen ill from lovesickness and she didn't want to know who the object of her adoration was. Pokway Yen doubted that he could help with matters of the heart. The girl promised that if he could help, they would definitely make him a pillow, and Pokway started talking about how even heart problems were no different from all the others and promised that the girl could rely on him. Among all the entertainment houses thriving in the luxurious Hangyang, Chenwolru was one of the most famous. This house was visited by numerous high-ranking officials, which was a very important source of income for Homun. As soon as Pokway went inside, he immediately became convinced that all the money would leave him. What was more important was that he was resolving cases that involved kisaeng and a different approach should be tried, and if the kisaeng fell in love, using the spiritual eye on her should be enough. Li Jiao led him into the room where the girl who was coming to help was and invited Pokway Yen to come in. In the room, he found the martial artist Peng and his younger sister, who were happy to see him. But Pokway Yen couldn't figure out what the two were doing in such a place. From the doorway I asked if they knew anyone who was a Homun, and the master answered that of course he knew and explained that it was he who recommended him to Chui Ban. Pokway Yen guessed that they were also acquainted with Master Homun. Master Pei laughed and said that it was rare that they had become close by chance. Although Pokway knew that the righteous school usually cared about public opinion when entrusting a task to a Homun, Li Jiao walked further into the room and asked everyone to follow her in case their conversations were over. She pulled aside one of the decorations, which concealed a door leading to a hidden room. Pokway decided that it was thanks to this that they were able to secretly collect information, and it was not surprising that such a place was managed by a Homun. The girl, without waiting for questions, said that from this place they usually watched suspicious guests and they rarely used this room. Typically, the popularity of an entertainment house was achieved through the reputation of one kisaeng, and in this house, Kisaeng Hua who had the highest reputation. Li Jiao reminded that however, this girl had fallen ill with love sickness, which was a serious problem even for a Chenwolru. She explained that marrying a kisaeng often involved huge ransoms, and sometimes she and the groom ran away together. Pokway Yen realized that Li Jiao wanted to find the object of the Gizing's affections before it happened. He directly asked Li Jiao whether he thought that the kisaeng would run away with her chosen one, and what did you answer that a kisaeng who hid her love usually did so. The girl added that at the moment they have found 3 suspects and Kisen's behavior changed only once she communicated with them. The first suspect was Ojianggun, the second son of a cloth shop owner who sold silk in the Hangyang. He was very extravagant but did not have enough money to buy back the kisaeng. The second suspect was Du Jiang. He was a distant relative of the elder Dong Panhangan, known for his dignified appearance and excellent poetic talent. And of course, he did not have the money for ransom. That suspect was Hyuksung Wool. Among the 3, he had the highest status, as he held the official position of Bukianho, the deputy captain of a 1,000-man unit. Li Jiao assured that this was all she knew and she placed the guests and the Pokway should watch and make a decision. Master Pei asked Pokway Yen if he really should have done this, His younger sister immediately began to scold him that it was he who had involved Pokoi Yan in this matter. Master Pei smiled and said that he thought that since Chui Ban had some power, she could then help him, and emphasized that he had no idea that the girl was going to separate the two lovers, which was against morality. The master said that in any case, if a sponsor was needed, he would find such a person, but his sister advised him to finish the matter, since refusal would only bring bad relations with the homeman. Master Pei said that Pokoi Yan was not a heartless man who would stand in the way of lovers. Using his talent, Pokoi Yan revealed that in fact, Hua, who was not sick with love sickness, her behavior changed when meeting these three young men only because she wanted them dead. I don't want to answer anyone's questions. Pokoi Yan made it clear that he should have talked to this girl first, but they tried to stop him. I want an explanation. Pokoi explained that the second son of the fabric shop owner was a distant relative of Dong Pan and the military officers of the Bukian-ho and the Kisayang of the entertainment house. And the incident was that the Kisayang stabbed three men to death for revenge. Seeing how they killed the Gizing who showed her kindness, Hua Hu decided to take revenge and immediately came up with a plan. She drugged their drink, stabbed them to death and disguised the crime as a fight between three rivals who were killing each other out of jealousy. Pokoi Yan remembers being impressed by the courage that went into this method, but then he had to make the others believe that he simply saw through everything. Pokoi Yan explained that the fact that all three became suspects at the same time meant that Hua Hui had fallen in love with three people at once, which he had found absurd from the start, and such an unlikely assumption usually hid another truth. Master Pei thought that trying to kill them was too much and wondered if there was a reason for it. Pokoi Yan said that the Kisayang and the entertainment houses were probably loyal to the Homo and martial arts masters. He thought that if these three men came to the Chungwol route together, they must have visited many other houses and seen many people, and it was a big coincidence that they were very close to each other. Master Pei asked how Pokoi knew that they were close, and he pointed out that Chui Ban had previously said that we would accommodate guests. People who were not close enough would not do something like that unless they wanted to save money. Master Pei thought this was amazing and suggested that I stand still and call the Kisayang and tell her everything, but Pokoi doubted that this was the right decision since she was going to serve them. The master noted that it was not difficult and it was worth making them wait, and Pokoi was worried that the master was going to use martial arts. Pokoi Yan began to beg him to settle everything with words, because if the great hero insisted on meeting with the Kisayang, it could affect his reputation. Pokoi Yan was already out and demanded that she convey to the girl everything he said, otherwise he would not utter a single word again. To which Master Pei nevertheless agreed. When they entered the room where the Kisayang was sitting, they immediately told everything and the girl began to cry. She admitted that it was all true and that she really was going to take revenge. Li Jiao couldn't even imagine that the reason was really like this, and Master Pei still couldn't believe his ears and noted that Pokoi was right after all. Master Pei believed that this was a good enough reason to kill them and said it out loud, which his younger sister agreed with, but not Pokoi Yan. Master Pei reiterated that in his opinion the murder was not immoral and suggested that Pokoi pretend that he had not heard anything, and Pokoi tried to accept this fact. Pokoi assumed that there was a high probability that if not the Kisayang, then someone else would have killed them sooner or later, and in the end he completely agreed with the master. At that moment, his body was struck by a strong energy and he realized that spiritual energy had increased in the upper dantian. This was a very unexpected reward. Master Pei at that moment asked if Pokoi had any advice that could help this Kisayang. Pokoi Yan thought, I don't understand what advice he could give her, and Master Pei asked how he would kill these people if he were in her place. This made him think for a moment. Everyone froze, waiting for Pokoi's answer. In the end, Pokoi Yan replied that he would not have taken anything if he had been in that girl's place. Master Pei was very surprised by this answer and asked why he would do exactly that. Pokoi mentally answered that it was because if you think that you can be caught, it is better not to do anything at all. Before Pokoi Yan could answer, a maid burst into the room demanding her mistress's attention. The maid looked very frightened and said with difficulty that their guest, Mr. Oh Jianggan, had been found dead. One would think that together, the Kisayang had already come into its own. How many minutes ago, this same maid stood before the master and reported that the great warrior Peng from the Hebei Peng clan was meeting with the Gizing Huahu. The manager was very angry. I don't understand how Brother Heck could allow this barbarian to walk freely, being a military officer. He explained that Master Peng was from one of the 5 great families, and if he recklessly opposed him, he could die instantly. He suggested that the manager fight him himself, but he responded that he was not so obsessed with Wahoo. Brother Heck asked if that was why he had recited such an absurd poem to her, which had greatly offended him. They answered him that his words were too cruel, and the people said that Mabu was cruel and ignorant of politeness. Another reminded him that Brother Hyuk had not even returned the silver that had been lent to him earlier. Brother Heck got angry and started cursing that when they needed a martial arts master they were all modest, now they are free to humiliate him. A fight immediately broke out between the three men. Unable to bear it, one of the gentlemen plunged his knife into Heck's brother. I note that he never liked him. Another gentleman tried to stop them, but it was too late. He still smashed the bottle on the head and stopped the killer, but instead of stopping, he decided to kill him too, because he didn't want to tolerate such behavior towards him. The gentleman began to call for help, realizing that his life could also be senselessly cut short. Another gentleman also started calling for help. I note that the scoundrel who loves Ki-sung tried to kill him. The maid gave a brief account of the fight, which was unbelievable for the others to hear. The most surprising thing was that Pokway could foresee this, which is why he said to mention the Peng clan, but Pokway denied that he did it intentionally. Ki-sen-hwa who immediately began to thank Pokway and promised that she would never forget his mercy even after death. Li Jiao couldn't believe that this Pokway could actually predict such an outcome. Master Pei interrupted all the thanks and ordered to keep what happened a secret, because if the rumors were distorted, the relatives would be offended. Master Pei himself promised that if anyone were to reveal this information to the people, he would kill that person in the name of the Peng family. Well, some sound was heard and Li Jiao explained that some of the guests that Du Zhang brought with him were martial arts masters and apparently they encountered Hyuk-song Wool's subordinates. Master Pei drove his sword towards the pier, saying that they should hurry, to which Li Jiao tried to stop him, noting that it was not a staircase. Li Jiao asked Pokway to run up the real stairs while the martial artists did something she didn't understand. He immediately rushed up the stairs with Li Jiao towards the sounds of the fight. When they ran to the place, the disappointing results of the fight that had taken place were already noticeable. All the masters who came running after him froze in place, ready to rush to prevent other possible consequences. One of the gentlemen was lying bent over on the floor, obviously badly wounded. Master Pei shouted to Pokway that Du Zhang had already wounded Hyuk-song Will and done it and they would figure it out, and he and Chui Ban should have run after Du Zhang. Pokway turned to Li Jiao and noted that she should have at least pretended to care about Hyuk-song Will and promised that he would catch Du Zhang himself. The girl looked around and realized that everyone looked like they were ready to die at any second, but they were still alive and if they were simply abandoned here, all the blame would go to the Shunvulru. The girl noted that she understood everything and thanked Pokway, and he, glad that the girl did not insist, hurried in pursuit. He decided that in any case, Du Zhang was not familiar with martial arts and had nothing to fear. He remembered that he had recently bought expensive elixirs and even learned a new martial art, so he had an advantage. Pokway was confident that he would definitely succeed in catching Du Zhang. He shouted at him, ordering him to stop. He emphasizes that he couldn't just go back to his home after that, but Du Zhang didn't even think about stopping, although he didn't know what to do. Looking around, Du Zhang noticed Podusa among the crowd and decided that he had been saved and that this man could help him. He rushed towards him, shouting that a madman was chasing him, wanting to kill him, and asked for help. He looked at Pokway and asked Du Zhang why Podo's subordinate would kill someone. Du Zhang was indignant at being made out to be a liar and began to demand that Podsa kill his pursuer. Pokway shouted that the young master had just killed a military officer in the pleasure house and escaped, and Podusa had to apprehend him immediately. Du Zhang hid behind the Podu and shouted that Pokway was lying. Du Zhang reminded him of how much he had done for his father, and he pulled out his sword and glared at the young man who dared to speak in such an inappropriate tone to the young master. Realizing that there was a fight ahead, Pokway adequately assessed his abilities, knowing that he would be able to stand up to everyone. Pokway tried to reason with Podu Ma and asked him to pay attention to the young master's clothes, which were covered in blood. Whilst his pod was distracted, Pokway decided to take advantage of this chance and ran forward. He decided to use the most powerful first form of the white snake whip technique. He decided to strike with an iron whip to break his position, which Se himself did not expect and did not have time to react in time. Pokway boldly and decisively stepped on the pod, knowing that the truth was behind him and it was worth punishing the criminal at all costs, as well as those who blindly defended him. Podusa was afraid, knowing that he no longer had a chance to dodge the blow. Pokway whip hit Se right in the pit of his stomach and knocked him down, causing multiple wounds to his body. Podusa felt a severe pain in his body, and his pride was also hurt, which did not help him to allow the defeat in marriage with the most simple Pokway. Podusa could not stand and bowed to the ground, dropping his sword from his hands. A deep wound appeared on his neck, which bled heavily. Pokway understood that Podusa had never expected the attack to be so powerful. Now he had to figure out how to quickly deal with the current situation. Pokway stood over the pod and began to blame him for the fact that a man receiving a salary could not protect a criminal for his own benefit. The crowd gathered around began to shame the pod for his vile act. Pokway asked the guards to tie up Se and Du Zhang's pods and breathed a sigh of relief, not understanding how he managed to do it. Du Jiang and Hyuk Sung-wol died together. Du Jiang was executed, and Hyuk Sung-wol could not survive due to his worsening wounds, but before his death, Hyuk Sung-wol gave evidence regarding John's crimes, leaving him no chance. Even Mr. Dong Pan was fired without being able to help. Po Kway-yeon believed that it was right to keep Hyuk Sung-wol alive, even though no one knew that he would bring formal charges. Lee Zhao approached Po Kway-yeon to express her gratitude and noted that the Hao clan would not forget his help. Po Kway-yeon noted that he was aiming to get the position of Pod and hinted that if Hao's plan could help with that, he would be very happy, to which Master Peng said that there was no need for that. Po Kway asked why, a little worried, already preparing himself for the worst, but the master laughed and explained that everything was almost ready. He said that he made inquiries and it seemed that the judge planned to appoint Po Kway-yeon as the new Pod, so he should have asked for something else. Po Kway thanked him and noted that he had heard that there were no such vacancies. Master Pei smiled even wider and asked if that was why Po Kway-yeon got rid of his pillow. Po Kway assured the master that it was all an accident, but then he just smiled. After which the master said that due to the mistake of Podusa, the judge decided to appoint Po Kway-yeon Podu in charge of Podusa's area. Po Kway was advised to try his best. And the sister asked how it happened and the master explained that he just talked to a few people and that's all. Master Pei was so grateful that Po Kway-yeon offered to call him his brother and he happily agreed. After that, Master Peng asked Yen if he had any other desire besides the position of Pod. Brother Yen thought about it and said that he did. The master assumed that he wanted to train martial arts and said that he had already asked Cui Ban for cultivation guidance and noted that the divine technique of Wigo had only one weakness, which was that it took a long time to learn. Brother Yen was very upset because he was going to ask for some silver. Afterwards, they brought him 3 manuals and asked him to choose, adding that it was impossible to allow the knowledge in these manuals to be revealed to outsiders. One manual suggested fast cultivation but lower spiritual frequency. The second one offered an average cultivation speed, but its spiritual purity was better than the first one. The last manual granted the slowest cultivation but the highest energy frequency. Master Pei's younger sister asked if Brother Yen knew which manual to choose, and he confidently replied that he did. At least in his mind one could notice doubts and uncertainty. The younger sister was sure that he would choose the third leadership, but to everyone's surprise he chose the first. Everyone was extremely surprised and, without holding back their emotions, demanded to know why he made such a choice. The master tried to explain that the impure internal energy would ultimately be a huge burden for him, and if it continued to grow, sooner or later it would reach the upper dantian and explode. Brother Yen calmly replied that he knew about it, which amazed the masters even more. Yen believed that in any case, his upper dantian was full, so learning an impure technique would not bring him any harm. He needed to accumulate internal energy as quickly as possible by any means necessary. No one knew when the fuse in the upper dantian would explode. Brother Young asked Brother Pei not to worry, although he was having a hard time keeping his composure. He asked to call him immediately if he felt anything strange during the circulation of energy, and Brother Yen thanked him and promised to do so. The only thing that interested him at that moment was what kind of equipment he had received. He opened the manual and flipped through the pages. He discovered that the divine art of Hahibutek was hidden within the manual. The manual said that internal energy was collected with every inhalation and exhalation, which meant that one could even freely stop and continue. He concluded that this was a completely different level compared to the divine art of Vigyug. Of course he would have to absorb some amount of impure energy. He decided that if he continued to save it and collect the elixir, everything should be fine and decided that for now his goal was to reach the second rank. Master Pei was worried about Brother Yen being okay. I don't know why he chose the first leadership. After this murder incident, many people in the city were discussing all the details. Very familiar names were heard at every corner of the street. New changes in positions were also discussed. I was also told about you, the young official, about the one who replaced his pillow. Many people heard rumors that he personally removed him from his post as Pod and considered this man to be very cruel and that he would extort a lot of silver. Although some were convinced that, on the contrary, officials on the payroll should not have accepted bribes, the city residents' opinions were divided on this matter. Well, the main rumor was that this man apparently solved crimes without much effort. There were so many rumors about him that many doubted that such an official even existed and tried to find out his name. Po Tien naturally heard all the rumors that were going around about him. Each time he passed silently and did not attract unnecessary attention to himself. Po Tien continued his work and once again tried to solve the crimes. A woman complained that a thief had broken into her drugstore. He quickly realized that the crime had been staged by the woman herself, since she had borrowed the money and was having a hard time with no income. The woman was completely shocked at how quickly she had been found out. Po Tien noted that this time he would not prosecute the woman for misleading her, but warned that next time she would not get away with something like this. He felt that his spiritual energy had increased again and decided that being a pod was much better than he thought, which only required training and celebrating the return of the officials. A boy ran up to him and asked how he understood that the crime was staged, to which he replied that he simply heard them mention 3 roots of fang fang and 2 roots of purple ginseng. What he liked most about his new job was that he didn't have to explain everything in great detail, which made his life a lot easier. I asked if he had heard the rumor that was going around the city. He did not know what was being discussed, and the young man said that people said that Pokwesa fell ill because of poison. Podian waved his hand and assured that he had nothing to do with it, although the young man did not even dare to accuse him of it. But Podian thought that he might have confused the inner and outer sides of the whip. The manual of the technique of the white snake whips clearly stated that the inner side contained poison scales, and the outer side was harmless. Po Du-yun thought that the cold hand of the snake Gosong might have made a mistake when writing this manual, and he felt a little uncomfortable. After thinking about it, he suggested that the young man check Podusa's room. The young man noted that he had already been caught in the disgrace of taking bribes, and now he could not even work properly because of the poisoning. I suggest that he should simply be removed. Under Yenu, it became clear on what rights the official communicated with his subjects, having no loyalty from them. Podian reminded him that he was still his subordinate and it was worth finding out what was going on. He agreed and asked if it was worth bringing a weapon. Podian explained that he had no intention of killing Pokwesa and there was no need for a weapon. He and some of his men went to visit Pokwesa and find out everything that was happening to him. When they got to his place of residence, they were very surprised. Po Du-yan was amazed that an official could own such a hotel and thought about how many fraudulent schemes Pokwesa had managed to pull off. After they all went inside, it became clear that the official had gone seriously bankrupt, because everything inside didn't look so chic. A young man immediately came down to them and wanted to greet them, but seeing that it was a Pud, he shut up. Pudyan asked him if Pokwesa was there. The young man began to shake. He was clearly nervous, but he still answered that Pokwesa was upstairs. Podian decided to find out everything at once and asked what had happened to the hotel. The man said that rumors began to circulate that the hotel had begun to spread poison, and people assumed that otherwise Pokwesa would not have gotten sick, so all the guests stopped staying at that place. Po Du-yan decided that none of this looked like poison and asked if the source of the poisoning had been found. The man shared that the source of the poisoning had not yet been found, but they noticed something suspicious. What was suspicious was that one martial artist was still renting a room in the hotel. The disciples of Po Du-yan agreed that this was indeed very suspicious and were already planning to catch this master. This master was from the Tang family, one of the 5 great families, and the most cruel and merciless. Po Du-yan decided that given their poison techniques, this master was definitely a suspect. Po Du-yan asked to convey to the master of the Tang family that Po Du-yan wanted to talk to him, and the inn worker immediately prevented him from conveying this request. Po Du-yan's disciples suggested that they simply leave the place quickly, assuming that Pokwesa was already dead anyway, but Po Du-yan ordered them all to remain silent. Soon the hotel worker returned with the martial arts master, with a girl who looked very unhappy. Her name was Dangran. She asked not to think that anyone could be forgiven just because they knew the Peng family and warned that it wouldn't work. Po Du-yan explained that he had called her to tell her something, to which the woman asked why he couldn't just ask if she had spread the poison, knowing that he had called her out of suspicion. Po Du-yan stated that he already knew who the culprit was and called the girl only to say that this hotel worker was trying to set her up, and also added that he checked the poison with his spiritual eye. He used his spiritual eye to determine its appearance and understood everything as soon as he looked at everything with his spiritual eye. The worker only pretended to be scared, but inside he was not afraid at all. For an ordinary worker, he was too calm and collected, and Podyan immediately began to connect the information together. The worker was the only one in the hotel, while the owner was poisoned, and there was only one regular guest in the hotel. There were not many suspects and it was easy to guess who was guilty. Po Du-yan also quickly learned that the worker was a thief in the past and was forced to work for free under threats from Pokwesa, and so a grudge was born in his heart. Taking advantage of Pokwesa's downfall, he poisoned his food in an attempt to kill him. Well, as the circumstances went on, the martial artist and the Tang clan stayed at the inn. Since no one would dare to interrogate a member of the Tang clan, he tried to shift all the blame onto her. Podian noted that the poison the worker used was probably in the pig liver in the storeroom and asked the others to check it out. That same moment the worker tried to escape, realizing that he had already been found out and that only cruel punishment awaited him. Well, he didn't have time to hide from sight, but several daggers immediately pierced his leg, making his escape impossible. The worker immediately apparently received even more wounds and fell dead to the floor, immediately receiving his punishment. Dang Ren thanked Podian, noting that she was now indebted to him. Although Pod assured him that he only did what he had to. Poduni asked to remove the body. "We will explain that there was nothing more left and there was no need to be afraid." The girl asked how he understood that there was no more poison. He explained that the famous martial arts master from the Great Tang clone would never handle the poison carelessly, and of course it had to be extracted to make sure no one else would get hurt. In fact, Podiyen found out about this thanks to a spiritual prompting, but he was glad that his attempt to get closer to the girl worked. Now all he had to do was politely leave and check on Pokwase's condition, but suddenly he was ordered to stop. Tang Ren, seeing that he did not listen to her order, shouted rudely that he was deaf and repeated that he should stay where he was. Podiyen found that Tang Ren's anger had flared up again. He was surprised that when the poison seeped into the bones of the Tangmon warriors, they were unable to control their anger. The girl asked Podiyen if he knew why she was staying in this shabby hotel, to which he replied that he could not guess. She said that she had one acquaintance who was a blacksmith and he was not part of a prestigious family, but he was a real master of his craft. The school had many blacksmiths who specialized in metallurgy and improving techniques to create unique and unusual weapons. Podiyen knew that even the school leader, who was closely acquainted with those blacksmiths, called him unrivaled. Podiyen then asked why this blacksmith did not work for one of the great schools, and Tang Ren replied that he had a wandering spirit. They were very close and she often came to him. One day he sold his forge, saying that since he was getting old he would return to his hometown Hangan, wanting to return to his roots. She could do nothing but wish him a safe journey. The girl noted that until last year he had constantly sent her letters, but this year not a single one had arrived, and she came to Hangan to meet him, but his house was empty. One of the students recognized the blacksmith as the elder Kane. The girl asked if the student knew him and he answered that the blacksmith was talented and loved by everyone, and it was surprising that she rented a room in this hotel because of him. Tang Ren noted the young man's insight and explained that behind the room she rented at the inn there was a good view of Kang's house, and came to the inn to check that Kang had finished his journey and returned home. Poduyun said that there were rumors that the elder Kang had become seriously ill when the time of his death approached and he suddenly left for an unknown place. The girl was very upset when she heard this. The teacher sympathized with her, noting that he was a truly talented master, and the girl added that he was also a good person, but Podiyen intervened, stating that in his opinion the senior Kang had been kidnapped. The girl became even more angry when she heard that it was possible to assume that he had been kidnapped, especially when Podiyen emphasized that not all of his skills were unsurpassed. He added that a person who wanted to return home would not leave it again if he were on the threshold of death, and if that were the case he would have come there in the first place. Podu also added that if the blacksmith was still famous, he should have had some health left, and where would he have gotten such a rumor from? Most likely, someone set everything up to avoid problems with the investigation. Podiyen noticed that the girl was very angry, although his assumption made sense, and noted that communicating with members of the Tang family was very tiring for him. Tang Ren demanded to know who was in charge of the area when Senior Kang went missing. Podiyen realized that quite a while had passed since the man went missing and the officers had not even tried to find him. One of the students of Podu shouted that it was probably because of Pokwei-san, who made them give up. Poduyun really liked that these young men were throwing all the blame on Pokwei-san like that. Tang Ren wondered what kind of scoundrel this Pokwei-san was, and Raden said that he was his former senior but he was demoted because of protecting a criminal. The girl called him a piece of trash and demanded to know his whereabouts. Podiyen tried to calm her down by noting that Pokwei-san was already his subordinate and there was no point in killing him. The girl was indignant that she was forbidden to do this, and Podiyen explained that he was going to find the senior Kang, and if she killed the official in this city, the others would be too scared to concentrate on work. The girl doubted and asked if he could definitely find the elder Khan, since it would not be easy, to which Podu told her that he should just see his forge. The girl still didn't trust him, but she was impressed by his skills and promised to reward him if he succeeded. Poduyun already knew who had kidnapped the blacksmith, but if he had said so quickly, it might have seemed suspicious and he would have had to pretend that an investigation was underway. One of the students asked Poduyun why he defended Pokwei-san here. Podu mentally answered that his death would affect his reputation, and even a slight decrease in reputation could not be allowed if he wanted to rise higher in rank. He repeated to his disciple that this man was now his subordinate and ordered Pokwei-kan to remain at the inn and monitor Pokwei-san's condition. After which the pod ran after the lady, who was still incredibly angry. Having inspected the forge only for appearance's sake, he announced to everyone that he was finished. He was accompanied by some of his students and his mistress. The girl was very surprised that the pillow examined everything so quickly and thought that perhaps he really would be able to find the missing person, and asked if he found out everything. Poduyun noted that among the nearby criminal groups was the Iron Scorpion Gang, and it seemed that they were the ones who kidnapped the elder Kang after asking to show them the way. The Iron Scorpion Gang was one of the most notorious criminal organizations in Hangang. They were famous for smuggling and robbery. They were determined and cunning martial artists. Dang Ren asked how the pod understood that this was the work of the Iron Scorpion gang, and he asked if the girl saw the dusty shelf, and she told him this. He explained that the masters had to be able to discern on the spot whether martial arts techniques were used there or not, just by the traces left behind. The girl wanted to ask him something else, but he spoke her mind and asked what they were going to do with this gang. When they got to the gang's hideout, it was discovered that there were at least 20 of them there, and one of the students asked whether it was worth calling for help. Dang Ren turned away from the backup and ordered all the students to stay put and went to the building herself. A few minutes later, the girl also calmly returned back, causing Po Du Yen to ask questions about what she was doing, but the girl acted very quickly and simply poisoned all the members of the Iron Scorpion gang with poison, and they were already slowly dying when everyone entered inside. Po Du Yen was amazed that the girl simply went and poisoned them so cold-bloodedly and so quickly. Most of the people on this team were no longer able to do anything against their enemies, except for one person. One of the men came out of the door into the yard cursing at what was happening. It was the boss of the Iron Scorpion gang named Iron Scorpion Fist Tak Mang. Dang Ren crossed his arms over his chest and asked the boss if he was the one who kidnapped Senior Kang. He was outraged that the girl considered the death of his entire gang justified only because they captured the blacksmith and warned that even her clan would not get away with it. The girl smiled and replied that if the governor punishes anyone, then we will mark him, that it was not worth considering the clan in the same way as his pathetic gang. So she angered me. He rushed at the girl, confident that he had enough strength to kill her, but Tang Ren reacted very quickly and stabbed her dagger into his collarbone. I was surprised that he was still holding onto my hands, suggesting that he might have taken some kind of forbidden medicine. Po Dian ran up to her, warning her that the boss of this gang had taken a bloody pill. In the world of martial arts, a medicine called a blood pill was often encountered. And despite its name, only a few added blood to the list of ingredients. Most of them consisted of suspicious herbal and mineral infusions. This pill temporarily increased hidden strength and internal energy, but the side effects were so serious that even non-orthodox schools tried to avoid its use. Judging by the appearance of the Iron Scorpion gang boss, one could assume that he had taken a very strong pill. His internal energy grew very quickly. It was strange that he ate this pill even though he knew he could die from its power. His unique martial art had gained the upper hand in the hidden weapon fight and Tang Ren was in great danger. Po Dian did not stand aside and used his whip to attack Tuckman. By doing this he attracted his attention to himself, assuming that the boss would continue to attack the girl. So Mang rushed towards Yen's side, who found that his external martial art did not allow him to be pierced with a whip. The only way out was to hit him hard. Then the pod had no other choice how to use the energy of the owner of the Southern Star of the Ladle. He believed that this was the only technique that could help him against such a strong opponent. Po Dian felt internal energy and strength flowing into him as he fought with this warrior. He knew that he would need a lot of strength to stop Tak Mang and used various techniques one after another. Soon he managed to win and he considered himself lucky to have managed without spiritual arts. Instead of his opponent he himself could easily fall unconscious. One of the students ran up and spoke with delight about how Po Dian had managed to put down the Iron Scorpion's fist with just one blow. But Po Dian assured that it was Miss Dang who had done it. Miss Dan smiled, because it was nice for her to butt in like that, but she emphasized that it wasn't worth doing, since it was Po Dian who killed the gang boss. He wanted to object, but the girl got angry again and shouted that it was he who killed him. The girl immediately apologized for the recent ones, explaining that the warriors of the Tang clan were characterized by an explosive temperament, which made Po Dian laugh, saying that he had no idea that the girl was hot-tempered. One of the students came up to make sure everything was okay with the pillow. Here he calmed his student down, although he mentally admitted that the battle had been tense. He thought that this whip gave him an advantage over enemies of his level, but in duels there are no predictable outcomes. Dang Ren scolded the student for interrupting her and preventing her from collecting her thoughts after enlightenment. They moved a little to the side and under the dream Yen repeated that everything was fine with him and asked why the student had called him. The student noted that perhaps they should have hurried into the house because there was a danger that the elder could have been poisoned too. Po Dian asked him not to worry, noting that he was close to the warriors of the Tang clan and knew exactly how to deal with poisons and the student should act more confidently. When he turned around, he saw that Tang Ren was already running towards the building, most likely to meet his old friend. The girl hid in the doors of the building where the members of the Iron Scorpion gang used to live. And Naz quickly found her old friend and grabbed his arm, trying to make sure that everything was okay with him. Po Dian noted to himself that the blacksmith appeared unharmed thanks to his spiritual district. He couldn't even guess how far the Tang clan's anger would flare up if this man was injured. The blacksmith said that he knew that the girl would come for him after seeing the code he left, but the girl did not see any code. He said that he had placed a beetle on an unused dusty shelf. The beetle and the shelf together represented a scorpion. The girl was shocked when she heard that the blacksmith hoped that the girl would guess because there were no criminal factions nearby that used the scorpion as a symbol, except for the Iron Scorpion Gang. Then Tang Ren understood why Po Du-yen had told her about the regiment and had figured out the clan elder's clue in such a short time. Kuznets noted that the girl had no idea and she admitted that it was the new pot who did it. The blacksmith thanked him for saving him, and we note that he would never have thought that the official would come to his aid. Po Du-yen assured him that he was simply lucky. The blacksmith emphasized that it would not have been possible to find a person in such a large region relying only on luck and stated that he would like to thank him. The girl asked him to take care of her reward. Tang Ren emphasized that now it was necessary to take the blacksmith to the doctor. The blacksmith resisted, assuring that everything was fine with him. Then the girl screamed again in anger. She grabbed him by the hands and dragged him to the doctor. Finally, the blacksmith turned to the pot and promised to send him a letter. Po Du-yen addressed his students, noting that everyone had worked well, and one of them thanked his teacher for his wisdom. The students asked him to go and rest, assuring him that they would sort out the rest, and Po Du-yen decided not to be stubborn. Suddenly he heard someone calling him from the yard again. At the threshold he saw Po Kwei-sa with one of the younger disciples. Po Kwei looked mad and walked straight towards the pod. The students of Po Du-yen were ready to fight their teacher, but Po Du-yen noted that this man did not come for revenge, but for another reason. Po Kwei-sa fell at the feet of Po Du-yen and shouted that he would dedicate his life to faithful service to him, who was the first to believe in him. Po Du-yen was very confused and asked one of his students what he had said to him that could have caused such a reaction. He explained that he had told about what had happened. And then Po Kwei burst into tears. Po Kwei-sa cried again and said that he knew that the warrior of the Tan clan tried to kill him, but he did not let this happen and now asked to accept his loyalty and service. Po Du-yen was very embarrassed that Po Kwei-sa had sworn allegiance. He had no reason to reject him, although the students claimed that this man could not be trusted. Po Du-yen noted this mistrust, that if he could not trust his own subordinates, then it was not clear who he could trust at all. Po Du-yen decided to leave all his past grievances against this man behind and forgive him, which caused even more tears in Po Kwei-sa. Overall, this situation pleased Po Du-yen, and he assumed that they could even get along. Sometime after this situation, Po Du-yen decided to visit the man he saved. The blacksmith thanked him for his visit, and it was clear that he was sincere. Po Du-yen assured that there was nothing special about his visit and he just wanted to make sure the blacksmith was feeling okay. In fact, Po Du-yen had no plans to come since he no longer wanted to have anything to do with the Tang clan, but the letters from the blacksmith kept coming. The blacksmith turned to his workers, noting that he wanted to talk to the guest alone and asked everyone to wait outside. Po Du-yen scanned the blacksmith with his spiritual eye and found that he was not in bad shape, but it seemed that all the workers had been threatened if the senior walk-on showed any weakness in his body. The blacksmith turned to the pot and asked if he was serious about martial arts training, which he confirmed, although he did not understand what he was talking about. I should first tell you that I also once aspired to become a martial arts master, and before joining the Tang family, I diligently trained in his family's martial arts. Po Du-yen was surprised that he was a master working in the main house of the Tang family, that the clan did not allow people to leave unless they earned great trust. The blacksmith continued to say that despite the fact that he had given up the life of a master due to a serious injury, he still felt uneasy about the martial art he had inherited. This technique was not the Tang family's, but his personally, and he wanted Po Du-yen to accept it as a token of his gratitude. He said that she had no relation to the Tang clan, so the young man was obliged to accept her. Po Du-yen understood that it would be rude for him to refuse and promised that they would do everything possible to continue her development. He felt that he needed a high-level martial art, and if this art was highly valued by the former warrior of the Tang clan, then it must have been beyond all praise. The blacksmith gave him the flying dagger technique, which surprised him greatly. The blacksmith asked if Po Du-yen knew much about the arts of hidden weapons and then honestly admitted that he knew very little, thinking that good hidden weapons were very expensive, so he never used them. In battles against inferior martial artists, it could be very useful and effective. The blacksmith tried to calm Yen down and assure him that there was nothing wrong with the fact that he had never used it. The blacksmith asked what Po Du-yen thought about his gift and then asked him to wait a little while he leafed through the manual. He thought that his art was too extreme. The manual said that it was necessary to pour all your internal and external energy into throwing the flying dagger quickly and sharply. The basis of this technique was putting all the force into throwing the dagger, and the blacksmith confirmed this without expecting that the young man was so capable. Po Du-yen asked if there were any other forms, considering that his art definitely could not consist of just one dangerous move, but the blacksmith assured that there was nothing else. The blacksmith said that the art of hidden weapons with other forms were weaker compared to those who did not have them. Po Du-yen asked what would happen if he couldn't finish with just one move. And then the blacksmith explained that he had to create a situation where one move would be enough. Po Dian had hoped for a more stable martial art, but recalling the techniques he had already learned, he thought that they were even too demonic compared to this. The blacksmith wanted to explain this technique to Po Dian more precisely, but he suddenly said that he understood everything and asked him to explain it himself, and in case he just wanted to get a correction. The blacksmith did not expect that the young man would understand everything so quickly and smiled slightly at him. Po Dian said that the soul-reducing flying dagger was a family technique mixed with the hidden weapon of the Tang clan. Therefore, a proper understanding required a lot of time. The blacksmith could not believe his ears and eyes how this master was already able to understand this technique perfectly. The blacksmith smiled, glad that he had found a worthy heir, and asked to accept something else from Yen. He presented him with 9 hidden arrows from the palace, which left Po Dian at a loss. The blacksmith noticed that this was a real treasure, and if you turned it in a certain place, several arrows would fly out of the hole. Po Dian was amazed by the truly incredible hidden weapon. The blacksmith laughed, noting that the young man was praising it, but he would still be pleased if this tool could one day save his life. Po Dian couldn't believe that it was true to accept this weapon, to which the blacksmith repeated his words about how he was once a warrior of the clan and warriors never forgot about favors. Po Dian couldn't believe that this person sitting in front of him was actually from the Tang clan, because he was very polite and ordinary. Their conversation was interrupted. A man burst into the room looking for the Elder Khan. Po Dian was very impressed by such a good person as the Elder Kang and was ready to defeat anyone who wished him harm. But some of his students appeared on the threshold, others poke way. One of them, seeing Enspod, was surprised that he had already received an order. Po Dian understood what he asked him to explain, and the student said that the judge was very angry with the Elder Kang. Po Dian couldn't understand at first what was going on and why the judge could be angry with such a good man. From the point of view of the Po Dian Pokeway, the Hengan judge was an important person to be feared and was responsible for the judicial system in Hengan. Therefore, he had more power than other officials. But what was more important was that he was able to appoint and dismiss subordinates. Po Dian asked what happened. The student said that the Elder Kang received payment but did not deliver the promised goods for more than 6 months. Po Dian was indignant, reminding them that this man had been kidnapped, but the students reported that the judge did not know about this and it was still worth escorting the senior Kano to him. No one could resist the will of the judge, knowing that their position depended on his mood. He could be very cruel and make any decisions that seemed right to him to punish disobedience. Then he told all his subjects that all their lives, including his, would be under threat. Po Dian listened to his students and decided to listen to the judge. The judge reported that the person he asked for had been brought. Po Dian came along with the Elder Kang, deciding that the man needed help to resolve this misunderstanding. The judge was extremely angry and, calling the blacksmith names, asked what had kept him there. But then he saw that Po Dian was standing in front of him. Only because the young man did not take bribes. Po Dian introduced himself and explained that he had come to help the judge with his work. He stated that he was modestly asking to be heard, and even if it seemed useless, the judge could whip him. The judge was extremely dissatisfied but allowed Po Dian to speak. Po Dian apologized and stated that this information was not for prying ears. Po Dian whispered into the judge's ear that old man Kang was deeply tied up by the slope of Sichuan Tang, and if he was provoked, something might go wrong. The judge ordered the old man to be released, reminding him that he had asked to check his work and not to arrest him. After this, the judge asked the priest if he was confident in what he said, and he was indignant whether he dared to lie about such a thing. The judge noted that the young man turned out to be more useful than he seemed and said that they would forget about bribes. During this conversation, another person appeared in the hall, broke down the doors and brazenly entered. The judge immediately jumped up from his chair and began to curse the uninvited guest who was behaving inappropriately. But the man called him a scoundrel playing judge. Before the judge had time to react, he immediately received a punch in the face. Nobody knew what to do or whether it was worth separating these two people at all. Tokonzu Tandem, the man who attacked the judge, shouted that he had gone too far when he dared to drag Elder Khan away. Po Dian understood who had come to see them and once again confirmed to himself that the warriors of the Tang clan were indeed even more aggressive than their leader, and could afford to burst into a house in court in broad daylight. Tokonzu Tandem demanded that the Khan's brother be called to him, and continued to beat the judge with all his might. The judge, shaking with fear, began to ask for forgiveness from this man, assuring him that he had simply made a mistake and did not recognize him. Po Dian decided to intervene and stop this fight. He came up and asked for an apology and explained that apparently there was a misunderstanding. Tokonzu Tandem immediately recognized him, because he had heard a lot and was glad that this man had found Elder Khan. Po Dian concluded from this that the clan leader had finally explained to this madman what was happening. Po Dian noted that the judge had already admitted his mistake and was about to release the elder and asked him to believe him. Tokonzu Tandem calmed down and looking at the old man asked for confirmation of these words, which he did. Tokonzu Tandem realized that he had made a mistake and stopped hitting the judge, but Tokonzu Tandem turned to the judge again, noting that he demanded that something be done and asked why he chose this particular person. The judge said that a monster appeared in his house and one night some strange creature appeared in his residence. This monster demanded that the judge return the loot to the people, otherwise he would swallow him whole. He hired expensive security guards but they could do nothing with this monster that continued to torment him by suddenly appearing and disappearing. Tokonzu Tandem looked at Yui in surprise and asked why he had not returned the stolen goods, but the judge assured him that he had never hoarded wealth. Tokonzu Tandem didn't understand anything and left and asked what the elder had to do with Khan. I explained that the monsters were vulnerable to yang energy and he wanted the blacksmith to create a device for fireworks to install at the mansion. The blacksmith now understood why this work was so important to the judge, and after apologizing, he promised to finish the device as soon as he could. Tokonzu Tandem decided that in order for the blacksmith to get home successfully, he would accompany him and invited Yena's pa to come along with him. Podu-yen didn't want to interfere in the clan's affairs even more and said that he wanted to investigate this incident with the monster in the mansion, hoping that the master would buy it and let him go. Tokonzu Tandem said that he would also like to take a look and asked Podu-yen to wait for him, promising that he would return as soon as he saw off the elder. Podu-yen had no other choice and decided to wait for the master, after which the judge took them to his mansion. When they reached the place of Tokonzu Tandem was surprised that they came to the beggars sect of the local branch of Haryana, Anya to the personal mansion of the judge. He didn't understand why they got to this place, but Podu-yen promised that he would explain when they got inside. When they knocked, they were met by one of the beggars who asked with displeasure what the official needed in this place. Podu-yen asked if he could meet with the beggar leader to discuss something, but the young man assured him that he could not allow it. Tokonzu Tandem was used to solving all problems in a different way and ordered a very angry one to drag his leader faster, and the young man, when he saw who was talking to him, stopped resisting. He invited them inside, which made the pillow very happy. The young man led them further into the building, assuring them that their leader was inside. They walked very carefully because everything was dirty and in general the place did not inspire much confidence. Inside there were a lot of poor people who were getting by on some dubious soup and a piece of damn bread. Soon they reached the leader who was sitting in the center of the hall and Podu-yen showed him respect as he showed, for example, to the judge. The old man, a local sect of beggars, noted that not everyone could recognize him and asked whether the pot was the same famous officials and how he declassified him, because his art could not be seen just like that. Podu-yen explained that he saw knots and it was said that in beggar sects, the number of knots meant rank, and the branch leader usually had 3 knots. After which Podu-yen added that the gentleman had no nodes, so he decided that he was the leader and was hiding his identity. He hid from this person that he used the spiritual light to find out. The leader of the beggars was convinced that it was indeed the same official in front of him and asked why he had come to him, assuming that he needed some information, and Podu-yen asked to talk in private. The leader, without any hesitation, asked his people to leave them and let them discuss important matters. After they were alone, the leader asked what the official really wanted from him. Podu-yen said that some kind of monster appeared in the judge's mansion and asked if this was the work of the leader of the beggars. It would not have been difficult for a martial arts expert to climb the wall and pretend to be monsters at night, and with the information that the beggar sect had, it would have been easy to find out about the layout of the mansion. Tokonzu Tandem did not understand why the sect of beggars needed this, and Podu-yen explained to him with a smile that perhaps the judge's corruption had gone too far. Podu-yen understood that the old man agreed with his words and asked what would happen if he was caught, and then replied that to his shame he did not think that they would be able to catch him. He said that since the trick with the monsters didn't work, they robbed the judge's mansion a couple of days ago, which caused both shock and delight among the tandem Tokonzu. He asked Podu-yen why he didn't report it here and decided to help the beggars. Podu-yen knew that this would only anger the judge because it would expose his crime. He decided that it was better to help the beggars and resolve the matter peacefully. Besides, the beggars were martial arts masters and could repay him later. Podu-yen spoke up about how the judge had acted unfairly and that as a civil servant he could not just stand by and watch. The beggar liner realized that the official knew what the judge had done, although he was sure that only his sect was informed about it. Podu-yen didn't actually know about this matter but pretended to know everything. The beggar explained that he was enraged by what the judge's relative, who worked as a broker, did. This man sold non-existent houses to innocent citizens, greatly deceiving the people. Podu-yen realized that this was much worse than he thought. The Eurokers needed official permits to run their businesses, and they had to hand over the documents to the authorities with their personal signatures. Podu-yen knew that if this man was caught, he would definitely be executed. Tokonzu Tandem wondered how this man was still alive. The leader of the beggars said that the judge covered for this man, and when the victims tried to file complaints, The judge portrayed them as criminals in order to shut their mouths. Podian got angry and turned to the leader and said that this man deserved to die. The leader thanked him for his understanding, glad that at least some justice still remains in the world. Tokonzu Tandem cleared his throat and was glad out loud that they got along and said that he should have said something else. He said that the Golden Guards were actually in Hanyang. The leader of the beggars froze in fear upon hearing this, and Podian did not fully understand what this meant. These were the emperor's bodyguards. But in fact, the spy organization was even more famous than the beggar sect or the Hao clan. Moreover, they were allowed to address the emperor personally, so even low-ranking officers could not be neglected. Tokonzu Tandem explained that he knew about this because he was close to the leader and heard this information personally. He noted that the problem was that rumors about this monster had already spread and they could interest the Gold Ones. He stressed that if they take up the case, he played the monster and the theft of silver from the judge will eventually be revealed. This was definitely not part of the beggar leader's plans, as he had already risked his own life and that of his people. The leader of the beggars did not understand when these rumors had spread, not knowing that Tokonzu Tandem had beaten a confession out of the judge what was the reason for the rumors.